Start recording now.
This conference will now be recorded.
Perfect, thank you. All right, good evening, everybody. It is Monday, November 23rd, 2020 at 7:01 p.m. This is a workshop with action for the City Council of Woodland. If I could please get everyone to please silence your cell phones and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Go through real quick here and make sure everybody who is. There we go. All right. Before we get started this evening, I have placed everyone approximately 6 feet apart at the dais and put a microphone a little bit closer. We've been having some challenges with the folks at home hearing council. There you go. All your microphones should be on and the volume is all the way up. So when you speak this evening or ask questions, if I could get you to lean forward and speak into the mic so staff can hear you and we're not doing a relay race and we can pick it up on the recording. That would be appreciated. And we're going to go ahead and take some roll now. Mrs. Graham. Mrs. Holland.
Present.
Mrs. Rounds.
Here.
Mr. Fredericks.
Here.
Mr. Plaza.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Chapman.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. We've got Mr. Chapman via GoToMeeting, and the other 6 council members are in chambers this evening. Going on to action items, we have 2 action items this evening before we jump into workshop. Our first one is ordinance number 1474, property tax levy 2001, first read. Isn't this final reading?
It says final reading.
Oh, it says final. Why did I say first? I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Plaza. Final reading.
Move to adopt ordinance number 1474 and the corresponding resolution number 728.
Thank you for that. I believe that we need to have them as 2 separate items. We're breaking them up to action item A
It
and B.
wasn't on the agenda that way, so
I know, and that was.
let's adopt ordinance number 1474. Or not.
Second. Who said that?
I did.
Oh, motion by Mr. Fredericks for resolution 174, and second by Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Fredericks.
No discussion yet.
Mr. Smith.
No comment.
Further discussion. Mr. Plaza.
I just want to clarify, this is the ordinance that will be a reduction in property tax, not an increase, correct?
Correct. I believe at the last meeting it worked out to approximately $36 on a home that is valued at approximately $350,000.
Okay, that's all.
Further?
No.
Seeing nothing else. Well, I will take the roll here. I was going to say the clerk, but that's me right now.
Thanks, Dana.
Take the roll on resolution 174, final reading, property tax levy 2021. Councilmember Rounds.
Aye.
Councilmember Fredericks.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Holland.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Plaza.
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman.
Aye.
All right. Action item A, resolution 1474 has passed 7-0. Moving on to action item B, resolution 728, property tax 2021, percentage increase.
Move to adopt resolution number 728.
I can't say. Want me to say?
You got a second on this? Okay, by Councilmember Graham. Motion by Councilmember Fredericks, second by Councilmember Graham. Councilmember Fredericks.
Ooh, that was hard for me to hold back on discussion on that. This is basically adopting what we just adopted, only in resolution form. So we're adopting, we just approved ordinance number 1474. We're now adopting the corresponding resolution, number 728, that corresponds with the action that we just took. So my assumption would be is that this would be the same outcome, but you never know.
Councilmember Graham. Further discussion? Councilmember Plaza.
So just to clarify for people that just see percentage increase, can somebody explain how we can have a percentage increase but yet a decrease in our rates?
And I will do my best, but I may have to kick this to Mr. Boyce. But I believe, so we have an ordinance in order to pass the levy increase by 1% and then the resolution to actually put it into action. My understanding is because of the evaluations throughout the city, it is spread amongst everyone. So our property valuations have gone up, which means, I know it seems silly, but tax value has gone down, or the taxable portion has gone down. And that's where we're seeing that $36 decrease, because that it's being shared amongst all the people. We have a number of new businesses in town that have raised our evaluation.
Okay.
Mr. Boyce, did I nail that?
Yes, so we have more ratepayers or more taxpayers, so it decreases the amount each individual has to pay. The overall pie went up by 1% plus construction, but because we have more taxpayers, it resulted in the decrease.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make that clear because I know some people see percentage increase and think we're trying to sneak something by. So
Absolutely.
I just wanted that clarified.
Thank you.
The other thing on here,
Mr. Smith.
if we had voted no on that last one, it would have decreased more. So it increased the total cost of the city, but us voting yes because there's more people in the pie, it decreased at 25.12. But if we had voted no on that last one, it would have decreased at 32.59. So it's still an increase, but it's a decrease at the end of the day for everybody.
Well
Yes.
said, Mr. Smith.
Yes, Mr. Smith. Further discussion? Why is Mr. Smith so angry this evening? All right. Vote on resolution number 728, property tax 2021 percentage increase, which is actually a decrease. Council Member Plaza.
Aye.
Councilmember Fredericks.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Holland.
Aye.
Councilmember Rounds.
Aye.
And the ayes have it, 7-0. Thank you. The time is now 7:08, and we are moving into a workshop. 2021 proposed final budget. At this time, to remind council, the budget has been placed on your desk now. All presentations have been completed and is now in your hands to complete and start the discussion. Some information has been left on your desk this evening in regards to the law enforcement levy. Did you not have one up there? Oh, I apologize. Does everybody have a copy of the 2020 levy estimates? You did not get one? There we go. As you can see, as you go through there, it's showing you, so the levy lid lift had gone through, and this is our estimated balance revenue less expenditures for 2020, which is landing at 199,671. And you can kind of go through and see what the estimated revenue was, 576, and you can see the line items of what the money has been, what has been purchased with the money. 4 police vehicles, some mobile radios, radar units, tasers, etc., wages, benefits, those types of things for our new hires that we've brought on at the beginning of this month. Handguns, AR-15s, all those things that they need to complete their job and keep them safe along with the community. So it appears that we have almost a $200,000 balance on that line item at this time.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Boyce.
You nailed it. That's totally correct. I wanted to mention to City Council, though, we would like to leave some of that money in reserve. We're hiring individuals now, and we need to be able to get, from tax receipt to tax receipt. So I don't have a magic number of exactly what that should be, but in your deliberations, I would hope you would consider some type of reserve.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce. And I'll go ahead and jump on that and bring the chief on board right now as well. I'm putting him on the spot. This isn't something we discussed, but it just came to. Mrs. Rand, do you have a question?
Can we put some of that in reserve?
Yeah, it's just hanging out there right now. So
Okay.
that's kind of,
Okay.
I think Mr. Boyce said, please leave some money on that balance there. I don't think
Okay.
there's anything we need to do with it, Mr. Boyce. It just kind of hangs there.
Yeah, we keep it in reserve, and it helps with cash flow until new revenues come in.
And then, Chief, I know that there was discussion earlier through the budget process about a fourth vehicle, but then the discussion kind of took a few meetings after that about the, I almost said portico, the Sally Port. And I don't know if that's something that we need to discuss again and maybe switch that from the fourth vehicle, or if you want to keep the fourth vehicle and move it to the Sally Port instead. I'll leave it up to you to discuss.
Yeah, the fourth vehicle will get us ahead in our vehicle rotation. So we'll have two vehicles, well, actually one vehicle that would remain for the rotation. So I'd be inclined to leave it that way.
Okay.
Of course, with council's approval. And Mr. Boyce and I had discussed perhaps using some of that funding for the Sally Port either late in 21 or early 22 to allow us to, I guess, generate a little bit of a fatter reserve in that account.
So are you asking, okay, I think I understand, so I think I can steer that conversation real quick here. When is the estimated revenues coming in for this line item? That's in May, is that correct?
April or May?
Yes.
End of April, and then the majority coming in May, correct? I think that sounds about right. Okay,
Yes.
and then the second round would be late October and November.
Right, this year it hit early November.
Perfect, okay. So I guess I would ask council to consider, we do have a funding mechanism in place, and with Mr. Boyce's request to keep a nice ending fund balance there in that account to allow us to budget for the Sally Port cover with the understanding that that project wouldn't take place until summer. But there's some, I believe we can get some of the engineering and type of work done now so that we're ready to go to construction and spend the majority of that money after tax revenues come in after spring. So I would encourage that. Mr. Plaza.
Just to make sure I'm tracking right. So the money that we're going to be putting into reserve, that's from the levy, correct?
Correct.
That money is just going to be used for law enforcement related items,
Correct.
right? Okay.
Correct. And that's where this funding mechanism
Right.
applies.
Yeah, when they said reserve, for some reason I thought it was like going to the general reserve.
No.
Okay.
No. It's still dedicated funding.
Right, that's, yeah, okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, it makes me nervous when you do that, Mr. Boyce. Yes, what did I say wrong?
So whatever's left in reserve from the Proposition 1 levy money, we would make that restricted reserve, so it could only be used for the purpose the citizens voted it in, and that being general police equipment and the 3 new positions.
Okay.
So, okay, I think I'm tracking. So the money is in, let me see if I get this right. The money is in general reserves, but there is a restriction on it, and it just can't, so it doesn't get lost.
Right, okay.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr.
Mayor?
Chief Kelly.
Keep in mind that we still have one more person to hire under the Proposition 1 funding, and then there is the vacant position that we still have to fill from Officer Swenningson leaving. So, obviously that money's not going to be used for the vacancy that Officer Swenningson provided to the department, but it will be filled for one more hire, or it will be used for one more hire.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Mr. Fredericks?
So I've heard ending fund balance, I've heard reserves, I've heard restricted reserve. What account is this going to go into? Because many could argue you're already spending general fund money on the police department. Why wouldn't this just go into the general reserve 301 and the council would determine future budget requests for Sally Port, cars, etc., since we're already paying for the police department out of the general fund.
Mr. Mayor, may I answer
Yes,
that?
Mr. Boyce.
Okay, so there are different ways we could do it. We could do exactly what Councilmember Fredericks called for. We could, at the end of the year, when we know what the exact amount is, we could have a council action to move that to Fund 301 General Reserves and have it segregated that way. Or you could leave it in the general fund, pass a resolution once we know what the ending balance is, designating that, for its purpose. General equipment, or, city council could even decide to make determinations on a case-by-case basis of, what that money is spent on.
Mrs. Rounds?
I just think the main thing is that we have it transparent so that the community knows that we're spending it on what they're paying tax on.
Absolutely. Mr. Fredericks?
Just to follow up, where's it going to go until the council decides? And how will the council be notified of a pending decision on that?
Right, so right now, the money is in the general fund. At the end of the year, for reporting purposes, we'll be finalizing the spreadsheet you see in front of you, showing you exactly what was spent, what was brought in, and how much is in reserve. We can have conversations with council about where you want to put that. We could leave it in the general fund, pass a resolution from city council restricting the use of those funds. Or if you would like to move it to Fund 301, that can happen also. And we put restrictions on the use of those funds in that location also. Does that answer your question, Mr. Fredericks?
Sure. Last question. This says estimated revenue for 2020. Is it estimated or is it actual? I would think by now we should have a fairly close actual number.
We are close to actual.
Okay.
There still are some funds that are trickling in, but that is very close to what the number will be. And that's why I'm saying at the end of the fiscal year, or at the end of the calendar year, we would true it up, look at all the revenues that came in, and all of the expenditures that happened, deliver to City Council that final balance, and then take the council action to segregate those funds and restrict those funds.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce.
Mrs. Holland?
So $199,671. So if we take the $75K out of it, it leaves $124,000, right?
If you were to do it right away, I'm suggesting that we wait until after the next round comes through in the spring.
Okay.
So you're looking at, well, probably another 576, estimated similar 570, somewhere right in there, whatever that comes out to. So half of that plus the 199 would be sitting there before the solid port where it was to be
So what part of the year, you said?
springtime, so about May.
So in May, I'll put it on my calendar
Okay?
that we'll be asking to shuffle $75K over for the Sally Port, right?
We can do it that way. What I'm asking is that it be budgeted now, so we know that it is a project on our work list, but it would not take effect until after the funding comes back in.
Okay.
So can I piggyback off of
Go ahead.
mine? Okay.
We can do it either way.
So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is if it's important enough for council to add it to the enhancements for 2021, do it part of the enhancement request through either a majority of this council if we want it done in 2021.
Yes, with the understanding that we won't move forward until after another round of funding to make sure that fund balance stays at an appropriate level. But that takes trust, obviously, from the council
Yeah.
and my office.
Yep.
Well, so we don't, how quickly at the end of the year can we move this out of the general fund and put it where it belongs? Because isn't that what he just said? Is
To
that
put the
it's-
restrictions on it
It's
when we-
like chilling in the general fund and we've got to.
We know it's there. Yes.
Right, but how quickly can it get shuffled over where it belongs?
Mr. Boyce, did you hear the question?
Yes, so we usually hold the books open to capture all of the expenditures that happened in the calendar year through the second meeting in January. If we know that there are no other equipment expenses that are coming through, really I don't see any reason we could not move that at the first meeting in January. So, yeah, we can make that happen rather quickly.
Okay. I'm going to put it on my little calendar thingy and so I can remember to ask you. Thank you.
Can I just add something? to
Mr.
that?
Fredericks?
It should be the staff's responsibility to keep track of things and bring those back before council, if there are council requests. Because typically what I've seen in the past is we'll have this conversation, we're in the middle of November, we're going to be approving this budget in December, and most likely, we are going to be approving budget amendments late in 2022 for 2021, and this will be a forgotten discussion. So it would be my request that these come back before the council, either in a workshop discussion at a later date in January, so.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. The discussion on this budget item or the discussion to put restrictions on the funding?
Both, yeah, the restrictions and what we're going to do if we want to move forward with.
Okay.
The Sally Port.
Okay.
In the back of
Absolutely.
the police department.
So just so we're clear, because I know there's folks that are listening at home as well, this is just important to my office as it is to council. This isn't, and I know, talking about perception and making sure that we are being transparent, that is my goal as well.
Okay.
We're not trying to slip this into general. I just want to make it clear that my office is not trying to do that.
I understand.
We feel just as strongly about this as you do. The taxpayers approved this by a very, very slim majority.
As slim as it can get.
As slim as it can get, so I know how important it is to prove that we are acting appropriately with this funding. So I absolutely agree that there should be restrictions on it. Wherever it ends up or wherever it goes, it does need restrictions. Absolutely.
I think we also have to be mindful that a strong minority of the community did not support this, and I think we have to be mindful of that.
And yes, absolutely, absolutely. So what I'm hearing is we're putting it on the list for January to bring back a place for this funding to go and what that looks like to put those restrictions, whether it ends up in 301 or somewhere else and restricted either way. But I guess my question is, does council want to have the discussion about the Sally Port at that time as well, or is this something that you're willing to have a discussion on budgeting for 2021 now?
Tonight?
Well, that's what we're here to discuss.
Okay.
I would personally like to wait.
Okay. Mr. Smith, did you have something to add?
I don't have anything to add on that. I had a separate question on this.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead. I'm just going to take that off the table then, and we'll wait to discuss the Sally Port at this time until January when we come back with the restricting of the funds is what I just heard. Okay, or enhancements. Let's just talk, we'll just say enhancements altogether. Okay, Mr. Smith.
It was brought to my attention and now raises questions. On the light item for uniforms and duty gear, where it says 3 uniforms and duty gear, it's $20,584.
Okay,
And you have 3 ARs that are about $6,000.
yes.
What is in the uniforms and duty gear to have it be $20,000 for 3 uniforms?
So the uniforms consist, and Chief, you can jump in when I'm done because I can somewhat answer this. You've got uniform shirts, uniform pants. You've got a vest, which are a few $1,000s, $1,500, I believe. Does that sound about right, Chief, for vest?
Somewhere in that neighborhood, yes,
Okay.
sir.
You've got the belt itself, and then each piece of that belt is separated. So there's a cost associated with that as well. You're talking multiple sets of uniforms to include dress and work, and then outside carriers and everything else that go with that. I'm looking down here to see what else is on it. You've got the tasers that are already budgeted on here. You've got the handguns that are budgeted, the AR-15, which is budgeted. Basically, the uniform and duty gear is everything that the officer wears.
So it's multiple uniforms.
Yes.
So this is basically one set of multiples for one officer?
They don't issue just one uniform now?
How many? No, there's not just one uniform issued, Mr. Chief Kelly. How many uniforms are issued to the officers?
I'd have to look at the CBA and find out what the agreement is, but I think it's 2 pairs of trousers, 3 uniform shirts, short sleeve, 3 short sleeve, 3 long sleeve, some soft ones to wear under their external carrier, plus all the duty gear that comes with it.
Which includes badges, nameplates, anything else, if they had stars like the chief, anything like that is part of that as well.
So just to clarify, this is 3 sets of...
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Speaking of,
Yes, Mr.
I do have a list here I could read through.
You good with, do you need the list?
No, I'm just
Okay.
curious how it got to 20,000 for just
So
three,
you got 3 officers,
Yeah.
and you've got everything that the chief is listing off?
for each
times
officer.
3.
So this is actually, like 12 uniforms, essentially.
Yes.
7,000.
Okay,
Yeah.
'cause the way I read it, it was 3 uniforms, meaning,
Sorry, no, that is to outfit
3
3
uniforms.
officers.
okay.
I know it's
What
still a big
about
number.
the ARs? You had a question
No,
about the
it was just brought,
Okay.
comparing the ARs to that, like
Okay.
$6,000.
I can tell you that
for
stuff
three
is,
ARs.
the uniforms are expensive. I know
Even what I paid for
someone very close to that profession. I can tell you that the pants run about $120 a piece.
I'm ready to roll.
The shirts around 100. I mean, they're not cheap items. It's not like you can go down to Walmart and buy a button-up for $20. I mean, they're expensive, and then you have to put the patches on there and everything else that goes with it. So it does get quite pricey and add up. Okay.
3 sets.
Any more questions on the law enforcement levy breakdown that's been put in front of you? Mr. Chapman, anything?
No, Mayor, not at all.
Okay, thank you. All right, at that time then, I guess I will kick this up to you for discussion. Seeing none, the budget's perfect. I'm kidding. Nobody jump in at once.
Where would we like to start? Anybody have a preference?
Sounds like you're up, Mrs. Holland.
Go for it.
Well, I think the packet that we got last Monday, that would be a fun one to start.
Okay. And I don't, Mr. Smith, did you get your, I left your packet up there for you, did you not? No, okay.
Which is hotel motel tax, right?
Yeah, since this is the most,
You want to start with hotel motel?
sure, why not?
Is it possible to put that up there?
Yep, we're gonna, Mr. Boyce, can you bring up the hotel motel on the screen, please?
Way to go.
I didn't bring mine either.
I wasn't here
It's
last week,
your
so
in the
I never got anything.
Okay.
So probably not a good one to start with, but it's such
No,
a,
it's going to take Mr. Boyce to pull it up here. Just take a few moments, so we'll get started with that. While Mr. Frederick runs to his auto to grab that. And while we're waiting, thank you, Mrs. Graham, for bringing in the treats this evening. We appreciate you. As always, I always look forward to this time of year and the extra 20 pounds I'm about to put on. So, I'm just trying to get, I just wish that I could get Mrs. Finn to get started on those Christmas cookies. She's a little bit behind.
Probably knows you're going to eat them all before Christmas.
Okay, so last year, everything ended up in the freezer, and between the children and myself, I think that we had depleted about 2 cookie trays. Because she started so dang early, I think she's on to us. So she has not started, and she promised that she would start probably this weekend. So, all right, Mrs. Holland. It looks like we have the line item up on the screen. Are you wanting to do the breakdown?
Well, this was on the list of, I think Councilmember Fredericks had, what, 10 items? 10 items that you were requesting. Sorry, you have cookie.
Yes, that is correct, and I have some stuff that's still missing. So I'm hoping to get clarification on that tonight, but
Okay. We'll do our best.
This was a nice fatty packet that we got most recently, so
Yes.
I thought we could look at that. And then there was also this 2021 enhancement request that was kind of tucked in there along with some liabilities.
Okay.
Has everybody looked at those? Or just me?
yes, I did.
So if I remember correctly, last year, when council was going through the budget and these items were being discussed, there was a lot about the chamber, and since that's at the top, the chamber and the visitor center. And I think, what is it that they're allocated for this time? What are we looking at?
What was the visitor center allocated this year, Mr. Boyce? Was it 50?
I think it was 50.
Around
yeah.
50,000.
50,000.
Okay.
50. Good job, Dave.
And their entire budget is, it looks like down here, 86,000?
For the chamber itself?
Well, it says, so your application thing is kind of wonky to me. So they get 50K, but over here it says, what is the overall budget for this event / activity? 86,962. So over half is funded by the city.
But tourism dollars.
Tourism.
So then we move on to, and they also got CARES funding this year, correct?
They haven't, I don't know if they've actually been given it. There's been some question of whether or not they can actually use it.
2,500?
I think it was 2,500.
2,500.
So that really hasn't been given to them yet because it's still unclear if they can have it.
Gotcha.
So it's still on the table, but there's been we haven't been given clear direction yet if it's possible.
Gotcha.
Do we have a listing of the agencies that we've approved but have not yet paid out?
We can get that. We're waiting for reimbursements at this time, so it takes a while for Chamber of Commerce. I can tell you that there's been a handful that have received, and as the reimbursements are coming in, then the other checks are going out. Because we are a cash-based system, so we have to make sure that we keep some of that cash that's in there so we can pay our own bills. So it's coming. We can get you a list by the first meeting in December of what's been paid out and what's still pending. Yep.
So with with the CARES funding, the way I understand it is the city fronts the money, you submit an invoice, and then wherever, Department of Commerce
Yes, that's correct.
reimburses you.
Yes.
So how long are they taking to reimburse?
It's taken a little bit. Mr. Boyce, have we received a reimbursement yet?
Not yet, Mr. Mayor. I've been on the phone with them this week, and I believe we'll have it shortly.
It's almost every other day. We're calling up there to get more answers and where the money is. We started with a very large check that went out to Love Street Playhouse. So because of that, some of those smaller ones are kind of waiting a little bit, but we have put out more than just the one. Mr. Boyce, do you know off the top of your head? I know the photographer got a check, Love Street got a check. Who else has received money?
The preschool.
And the preschool was the other large one. So right there, I think we're at about, 50, 60, 75,000 in reimbursement waiting to come back. So once we get that 75, then we'll be able to get a good chunk of the other ones that are waiting their checks because they're smaller figures.
And shortly here, you'll see a large number of checks go out and money coming in.
Good.
So
Okay.
it's coming to a head.
Well, that's nice that you've gotten some progress since they were so happy to announce that everyone was getting money, but they didn't quite explain the process.
No.
They never do.
Yeah.
We had to allocate it by, I believe it was, they moved it to the end of this month. Is that correct, Mr. Boyce?
Yes, that's correct.
So, but yet they're not sending the.
Doesn't have to be paid out, it just has to be allocated.
Allocated,
Correct.
yes, yes.
So, Commerce, if Chamber can't use that money, does that mean we're going to try to reallocate it to somebody?
The 2,500? Mr. Boyce is working on something right now that I'm not ready to share yet because we don't have an answer. But yes, yes. Which would be reimbursement to the city, a possible another reimbursement through this time period that would go towards salaries.
And then, since we're talking about CARES funding, so council agreed to create a system for utility assistance with
Yes.
some of the CARES funding. Did that process ever happen?
Yes, the clerk treasurer's office was actually on the phone last week because we've had very, very few applications come through. So the clerk treasurer's office was on the phone calling those that we are known customers that could use the funding and trying to get them to submit the application so they could get some assistance. So we're actively reaching out now, trying to get folks to actually use the program.
But there is a system in place currently?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's an application, the whole bit, yes. So all the way down to the point that we're now calling folks, saying, hey, we know you need the help. Could you please fill out this application?
Well, I know somebody that can help refer customers that direction.
Good, yes.
So back to this, the tourism, the hotel motel rooms, just
Okay.
because that one's a fun one to talk about. And I'm not being sarcastic, I'm just tired. So, Planners Day, their entire budget is $36,000 and they only ask for $2,500.
Yes.
That seems kind of tiny to me.
I think it was $2,505.
Yes, let's not forget the $5 for marketing. And Y Racing, theirs is $7,500.
I don't think so.
Well, Planners Day doesn't have salaries that they have to pay, and the information center does.
That was just for our advertising.
So this, I don't know if anybody noticed, but Y Racing doesn't say what they're doing with the money back here.
I did not notice that, but I'll tell you, I know what they use it for just due to the reimbursements that came. They use it for advertising.
Okay.
That came in for this year.
Well, but then on that part, the way the world is going this summer, and it doesn't look like it's going to be much better for.
I'll say that, Mrs. Graham.
It's going to be a significant improvement.
I do not see any
Boogaloo's gonna
benefit
start next
to
year.
that for the city at all,
For what?
for Riley,
For Y Racing?
for Wyatt Racing.
To have a virtual event that brings nobody here because
Right.
it's virtual.
Correct.
I agree.
Well, last year, didn't we not give them any money anyways?
That was the other one.
Oh, that
Yeah.
was the other one? Okay.
They just moved it to the county, though.
Yeah.
So we could put that on, like, pending, can we say, vote it in later?
So these funds, there is a process that goes into place. So if council would decide, what else is on the list? I just want to pick one that's not, we'll just take Y Racing, for example. The recommendation has come from the Lodging Tax Advisory Board to allot $7,500 to Y Racing. If council decides that they do not want to allot that $7,500, there is a process in place that we have to reconvene the Lodging Tax Board, bring them together, let them know that you don't agree with the $7,500 allotment and try to get them to give a different recommendation but at the end of the day, it's a very strong board. And Mr. Boyce, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I know we've gone through this before. They can still allot the $7,500 without council approval.
They probably allot it because it would bring business to Woodland, but if it's going to be
There's
virtual again.
Yes, but there's still a process in place that there's some back and forth with
Correct.
timelines
Correct.
with this particular allot
Correct.
of funds.
Yeah, it was my understanding.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
I believe after it goes back to the lodging tax committee, city council can then
Then they can say
make
no.
a change as
Okay.
they see fit.
Gotcha. And these are items that will come back to council for final approval. Even though the budget is adopted with this in there, these items will still come back forward for actual allotment.
I believe so, yes.
So last year, or this year, let's just say this year, so the 6K or whatever that the Lilac Gardens would have gotten, though they couldn't open, so they didn't advertise.
Correct.
So then next year, they will theoretically still have the 6K from this year that they didn't spend.
It's a reimbursement process. So there are some funds that were spent before the shutdown. And I don't know what the actual expenditure was for the Lilac Gardens. Mr. Boyce, do you know for 2020 what they actually spent versus what they requested?
I don't know off the top of my head, but if the money isn't spent in 2020, it would revert back to fund balance, and then they need to reapply for 2021.
So we don't send a check out for $6,000, say, here you go, have fun. They actually go out, they spend the money, and they ask for reimbursement to prove that it's spent on eligible items. And I know that with some of these organizations that were allotted for 2021 dollars, some of the money had already begun to be spent before the shutdown occurred. So that's what was reimbursed, and I don't know, I don't remember off the top of my head what Lilac actually spent before the shutdown, if they actually followed through with the entire allotment or not.
So the money is still,
It's back in our savings
Okay.
account, I guess, if you want to look at that. It's in the ending fund balance for this account.
see, that would be my question, is if people are getting, like, double portions, I guess is
No.
kind of how I was,
Gotcha.
yeah.
No. What's that? Mr. Fredericks?
I don't want to interrupt you if you have
No,
the floor.
go ahead.
Okay. What I would like to see, and I know we've talked about this before, is the facility that we currently have our visitor center in.
Yes.
What I would like to see is, and do we have the ability, certainly if we have the ability to pass a resolution for restricted money for public safety, why don't we have a resolution that restricts money for revenue that we've received for the lodging tax, hotel motel funding, that goes into a restricted account to fund a possible new facility over there? So, granted, we don't have a lot of revenue, but if we started with the Y Racing, and if we started there, and we matched that, we could start putting something aside to this fund that hasn't yet been created, so hopefully one day, we can possibly use that in conjunction with state money, we can do that with county money, maybe with port money, and actually build a facility. I kind of envision Castle Rock's new facility over there versus what we have currently. So, not yet, no.
Mrs. Rounds?
We might even get a grant
Exactly.
for part of it also.
But if the city has nothing to match and we don't plan accordingly, we will never get to a position where we have anything to match. So if we take $7,500 and match $7,500 out of the general fund, or even
And restrict it.
or even $50,000 out of the general fund, and we restrict it for that use, can we do that, given what you can be reimbursed for? I believe you can be reimbursed on the lodging tax money.
So, and please keep in mind, so the two things, I have a comment for two things to that. We tried to change the law. Snohomish County and Cowlitz County are the only two counties in the state that are treated differently when it comes to this funding mechanism. That did not pass, but that was the intent behind getting the second half of funding. So currently, right now, we're only keeping half of the funding of this line item. The other half goes to the county for their programs. Our intent when we approached the legislature was to get that other half back in here, restrict those funds for a new facility. That didn't go that way. Keep in mind that a new facility will, when we look at these items that are being allotted now with the amount of money that we have, once built, there will be ongoing costs associated with that, to mean power, I don't know, a number of items that will have to be maintained, which would more than likely come out of this fund because we don't have funds to maintain a new facility. The conversations that, I'll stop there.
I just don't see that facility as an ongoing concern past 5 years, and it's our responsibility to either make a decision to not have it, improve it, or status quo, I guess, are our choices.
I would encourage council to have a workshop with the chamber board to see exactly what they want. Oh, okay. Because there are conversations behind the scenes that cities should not be involved with such conversations. So I would encourage you, if you'd like, we can set up a meeting between the players over at the chamber side and members of the city council to have that discussion.
I believe we've already done that, and we're still here.
Yes.
So I guess that would be my thing, is if we're going to do something, we should probably figure that out, because I just don't see that as an ongoing concern past another 5-10 years, especially when we start talking traffic improvements over there.
Correct. And that was the need for the
So-
conversation originally, is the improvements at exit 21, knowing that there would have to be a move at some point.
Okay.
Mrs. Holland?
Okay, so we keep saying it's the city's responsibility, but for the visitor center, correct? So why isn't so the city funds it, but the city doesn't oversee it or make any decisions about it?
Correct. We used to, I understand, historically, and I can be corrected, there's people here in this room, the city did used to run it, and we turned those operations over to the chamber because we were unable to fulfill the need.
But one of your suggestions were to consolidate City Hall and the visitor center.
Yes, and I don't remember that, I just wrote down a note, bring back the presentation for council and update it. I don't remember where those, I believe those conversations stalled out. So that presentation is just hanging out there, and we can bring it back for discussion at a later date if you'd like. I can reach out to chamber. It's up to council how you want to proceed with that portion of this topic when it comes to facilities. I can reach out to chamber. We can have that conversation again and see where they are as a group, if they're willing to move forward or not, and then also update that presentation and bring it back forward for discussion if they're willing to have that discussion with us again.
Because you have a ancient city hall that's falling apart and doesn't house everybody, and apparently is a death trap. And you have a visitor center, the portable, that's like, gosh, if that's the same one that used to be at the Dairy Queen, it's like almost as old as I am.
It's not.
Oh. Well, the portable, which they don't have enough room to really do much in there, right? I mean, it's pretty tiny, and you could sell a lot more merch if you had more space.
And I would suggest that conversation again be brought forward from, I can't speak to their operations, but Mrs. Miller probably could. And if we're going to follow up with the conversation, we can bring them in, and that's a question that could be answered by them.
And wasn't part of the roundabout situation over there supposed to take out like a chunk of the parking lot?
Yes. Potentially, if that's the route that ends up being the improvement, then yes, there will be a portion that will have to be moved.
Okay.
Oh, Mrs. Graham.
Has the topic of this conversation gone beyond what we're supposed to be doing tonight at the workshop for the budget?
That's,
It's germane to the discussion.
Just asking.
Consistent.
So maybe put that on your to-do for the first
Okay.
part of, because again, COVID's not forever, right?
Correct.
We've decided COVID's not forever, and so some of these events might theoretically happen next summer.
Yes. And as we're moving forward through this conversation, I've heard suggestions from Mr. Fredericks we'll start with you. I've heard just, well, I shouldn't say you. Someone said why racing should be off the table. I'm summarizing. Why racing $7,500 should be off the table. Mr. Fredericks has brought up restricting some type of funding mechanism for future facilities potentially for the visitor center. These are all kind of hanging out here, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Well, I think, like, why racing, if it's going to be virtual, like if COVID is forever, it's not, like, some of these aren't things we can even make a informed decision upon. They still need to kind of hang in limbo because we don't know what next summer, these are summer events. Well, outside of the Lilac Festival, which is kind of springish, the summer things, like why racing, theirs is what, like August, I think is their event.
I think so.
Is
Beginning
August.
Beginning of August.
Right, so 8 months, 9 months from now, it theoretically could happen. And I don't have anything against our organization or anything. It's just, if it's going to be virtual, it's not fulfilling what this fund is intended for.
Correct.
Which is to bring people to our town to spend their money.
Correct.
So,
So we will, most likely, we will adopt a budget, and as soon as the budget is adopted, the very next meeting, we typically vote on this. And at that time, we can make any adjustments that we want. We can request additional information. We can, I know there's a timeline, but I'm not, I don't know.
There is a timeline, but again, if there is a suggestion that is different from what is brought to you, we have to reconvene the board, so there is a timeline.
Oh, got it.
So if you say, I don't want to fund this line item out of this fund, we have to reconvene the lodging tax board and have them brought back together, and explain to them what council's expectations are and what they're suggesting, have that discussion, and then it'll be brought back to council again.
So it would seem to me that it would be prudent to say, we don't, at least from my standpoint, I don't have an objection to giving Y Racing Lucky Triathlon the funds, provided they actually have a triathlon in Woodland. If it's going to be virtual, then I don't want to pay, I don't think it's appropriate to pay any money for virtual.
Well, let's
For-
cut in here real quick.
Oh, sure.
Mr.
Just
Plaza?
to kind of cut to the chase, that's pretty much where I was going to go with it. Is there a way that we can set the money aside for Y Racing? You know, okay, you're getting the money, but have a caveat on it saying, however, if it's not a in-person race and it's just all virtual, then you forfeit that cash.
Then I would suggest not allotting those funds until later into 2021 when we know for sure it's going to happen.
But that would be a
I still think that there's time for them to advertise.
That would be a change, though, that would be a change, and wouldn't that require, because we're putting a caveat on the funds, doesn't that require it then to go back to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee?
I guess a simpler way of doing it would be to this funding mechanism, or this funding ask will come back to council. Although you've allotted for it in the budget at $7,500, at some point into the future, it's going to come to you to actually write the check. And we say, on my side of the table, we put it on the calendar, we're not asking you to write the check until further into 2021 when we know for sure it's going to happen.
Got it. Presumably, could they advertise?
Because, and that's why, because if they start advertising, we're going to have to start reimbursing. So now we've reimbursed $6,500, and now it's gone to a virtual event. We can't get that money back because it's been allotted. So I would suggest coming back, bringing that item back to you in March to actually write the check, I guess, to allow for reimbursements, or April, if we know for sure that it's going to happen.
So if
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Boyce.
oh my.
I might be stepping out right now. Let me talk to my boss real quick.
referee,
Mr. Boyce.
So what I suggest is we discuss with the city attorney whether or not we can put that restriction on Y Racing to have a live event in order to obtain the funds. It may not actually be a contradiction to what the committee did. And then we can execute a contract with Y Racing with that stipulation in the contract. I'd like to review it with the city attorney, though, first to make sure that is doable, but it sounds to me like it could be.
Is that something, it sounds like, is that something that we can do with all the, I'm going to pull the visitor center out of here because that's an ongoing function. But when we look at all the other ones, is that something that we can go into contract or ask the attorney that same question on those ones? I'm thinking of the Lilac Gardens specifically because that's a in-person thing going there.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why not.
Okay.
Because if that money is not spent, it just, you
It stays.
said, right.
Yeah.
So then, if things are all virtual again, then there'd be a bigger pot of money just sitting there for them to acquire, and maybe they could get more the next time, right?
Correct, yes, if they know for sure that they're going to go into an in-person, absolutely, in 2022.
For all the people who are holding events and whatnot, right?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, absolutely.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Boyce.
Just one more item to throw out there, and like we're doing this year, we will need to monitor revenues going into 2021. With all the COVID restrictions, that revenue may not be where we think it might be. So
Good
we'll
point.
need to make stipulations on the fact that, if the revenue's not there, we can't pay it out. But anyway, just another wrinkle in the conversation.
Okay, and that is why we did the 3 payment to the visitor center this year. Is that correct? Because we weren't sure about the revenue?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
gotcha, okay,
Thank you.
you bet.
I learned a whole lot about that. Thank you.
Okay.
Are we off of that?
Are anything further on lodging tax dollars?
I think I beat it all to death really well. Thank you for your
You're welcome.
patience.
You're welcome. That's a weird one. That's there are things that we have to follow with those dollars being spent.
Right.
Okay. Anything else on lodging tax? I think we got our direction on that one. Okay. Next,
Humane Society?
Humane Society, Mr. Boyce. I'm not even going to attempt it.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Update on the Humane Society.
Statement and question.
There was no question, just Humane Society.
I have a
Yeah.
question. Oh,
Well, it is status quo. I think we provided,
that's the problem.
and there is a newer report I need to get my hands on, but we provided a report to City Council last week showing some of the calls that have been received and some of their actions they've taken. The contract is still in place. We appropriated the dollar amount in the expenditures. I think it's around $14,000. So at this point, it's status quo.
Mr. Fredericks?
Can you tell me what the funding dollars are for Humane Society for 2019 and 2020? I don't have that number in front of me.
Yes, give me a moment.
I got that. It doesn't have. Don't cry, Carol. It's okay. I thought you were crying.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. Last year it was about the same, 14,400. The year before we had the increase.
Uh-huh.
which was a double up, I think, wasn't it? If I remember, it used to be like 7,000.
It went from about 9,000 up to 14. If I
Why do I know this
10,000 to
stuff?
14.
I don't.
Mr. Boyce, can anyone tell me what we're paying for exactly? Because in 2019, if you look at the number of what appeared to be somewhat proactive, we've moved to a very reactive in 2020. And you can tell that by the activities that have occurred for Woodland. So I'm not exactly sure, on behalf of the taxpayers of Woodland, that we're necessarily getting our money's worth here. And I feel like this report is lacking in summary of anything. There's nothing here. This is not a report that I would expect to get from an agency that has a monopoly.
That's why they do it that way. Where else are you going to go to?
Right, and I don't disagree with you, Councilmember Fredericks. If you remember back to when we renegotiated the contract after they had the funding crisis, it really came out that for years they hadn't they hadn't been watching their revenues. They had been using some grants or donations to cover operating costs, and when those ran out, it created a problem for everyone. We did at the time get together with the other jurisdictions, and it was determined at that time that there wasn't really another good option. But it may be time to bring up that conversation again, and the last time we talked about it, we were in crisis mode because we had to make a decision quickly because everything was happening. Now we have the luxury of a little more time and space, so it probably would be a good time to have that discussion.
Well, as one member of the council, what I would like to see is an actual report. I'm not sure if this is what was provided by the city or if this is when you requested a report, this is what was asked for, but it's lacking in, I guess, just tell me your story. Information, yeah, it's telling me the numbers, and by the first glance of the numbers, it's telling me that, again, we've moved to a reactive situation.
Mr. Frederick, it's always been a reactive situation.
Well, you would
Without
think, though, when they double their fees, that we might get a little, a hug or buy me a drink or something, So it doesn't make much sense that we're paying double what we paid, year before last, and we're getting less than we were paying for before.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Boyce.
What I might suggest is allowing me to contact the director, ask for some more specific numbers, and then maybe ask for a presentation to City Council. This has been a concern for a number of years now, and we haven't heard from them directly. I think maybe now's the time to bring them in, let them talk about the services they provide, and they've had a year or 2 years now to recover from their financial issue, and let's get an update from them and hear directly from the director.
Also, it should be noted that the report here has April, May, and June of 2020. There's no January, February, or March. And in addition, for their quarterly report, they've provided us for October, November, and December. It's not even of last year.
Okay.
It's not even an actual story of really what's going on. So I think I have an issue with approving that funding. I have no choice, so I have to do it. But this is an agency that I don't feel comfortable just handing the money over. I guess that's where I'll leave it.
Just because I am the way I am. What happens if we don't approve the funding and we just tell them to go pound sand?
Police department handles it.
Yeah.
We're not.
We would have no
We're not
way.
equipped to be-
We would have no way to enforce our animal codes.
Well,
That would be
doesn't the police
main
department
issue.
already, are the first ones called out for animal enforcement, for nuisance and dangerous animals? At what point does the,
Yeah, if there's
Humane
immediate
Society.
danger, our police department, I believe, does respond.
right, so what would be different?
Parking dog.
You know, they get called out for barking dogs too, that's a noise complaint.
I'm going to drop my kitty off at the police station.
We don't have the infrastructure to maintain animal care here in the city. That would be an additional cost to us.
Okay.
Mrs. Rounds?
I forgot my question now.
Mrs. Holland?
Hate it when that happens.
So it says DOA, so my assumption means that they're coming out when there's,
Get on it.
Roadkill.
right, but correct me if I'm wrong, maybe Ms. Coleman could explain this, but I think Public Works scrapes them up, like when deer get hit and everything on Lewis River Road. I think
Ms.
it's
Coleman, does Public Works respond to deceased animals and collects them, and then who removes those from the city, if that's the case?
If we see an animal that's deceased in the road, we actually do go and collect it from the street. Most of that is possum and raccoons. I haven't, in the last 3.5 years, it hasn't been any dogs or cats.
And then what happens to them at that point?
They go in the garbage.
Thank you for being so frank, Ms. Coleman.
That's why we pay those exorbitant garbage rates every year.
Mrs. Rounds?
Actually,
They
it's,
cannot tell a lie.
actually, I was shocked this past year when I heard that we had no leash law in Woodland. I thought we did have.
Just let 'em rip.
And so if we did have, there'd be probably a lot more calls, but
So, and my understanding is, with our history with Humane Society, when these rates went up, we did have the director at that time come down and give a presentation to council, discuss the financial trouble that the agency was in, and my understanding was is that their budget included the animal services, which is what we're paying for here, and the other portion of it would like the adoption center and care center. Those budgets were merged together. The increase came when these two entities within the one were separated because one is ran on the grant dollars and donations, where the other one is actual service that is being provided out to the citizens. And that's where the double came up. But I do recall during that conversation that they said our numbers spike when they get a complaint because on their way down here, then they do a drive-through, I believe. And they might hit a complaint or two, but other than that, it was all reactive work. There's no proactive. So I would,
Oh,
go ahead, Mr. Boyce.
and there was a stipulation that we didn't ask for active patrol because that would cost extra. So when they do patrol, it's, when they're passing by the city or through the city. So yeah, it's not a regular activity.
And I know since that presentation that was last given to council at this, so that I would say that was 2018, the director has changed. That director was only on for a few more months after that presentation. So I know that director was very active in making sure that those budgets were separated, and this is what we have now, but that person's no longer with the agency.
So to get your 14K worth, somebody should just make sure once a week we do a call. And then they'll do a drive-by around the town.
Should we have a sign-up list?
I mean, because seriously, I see the same things on Facebook too. Like every day somebody's lost a pet. Their dog has escaped or their cat's escaped or whatever. And somebody always rescues them. So it's not like we're calling Humane Society to come down and find animals, because the neighbors seem to be able to rescue animals faster than the Humane Society. But, like seriously, I think I'm in agreement that it doesn't seem like we get a whole heck of a lot for 14K. Like you could hire a part-time person to run around and catch animals, right?
14 grand, I'll run around and catch all the.
I would ask council to take up Mr. Boyce's request to reach out to the agency and have them come down and provide a better report with data, and also a presentation on exactly what the service is being provided to the
And I
citizens of
think,
Woodland.
I think part of the concern that I hear from some of the taxpayers in Woodland about the Humane Society in Cowlitz County is the humane treatment of animals. And that was a concern that was raised with the last director that was in there. And so I'd like to have an understanding of what changes have been made from the previous director to this new director to address some of the concerns that were raised. I believe it was in the Daily News, the article that was raised. I can pull that up for reference. But there were some allegations that were made at the time that were rather concerning. So I'd like to have a clear understanding of what changes have been made since this new director has taken over.
Okay. Absolutely. We will get on that and get them scheduled for 2021. Okay. Anything else on the Humane Society? Okay. Next. The council want to, it's 8:11. We've been at this for an hour. Does council want to take a quick break?
Sure.
Okay. Let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back in session.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Keep in mind that the YouTube channel is still rolling right now.
It's got a photocopy of that there, right?
Yes.
I could just steal one of theirs and go
Yep.
photocopy? Is that an option?
Yep, I'll run back there real quick for you. Can I get someone's packet from last week that was dropped on your desk?
I didn't need one. So we need more than one copy.
Oh, this? Oh.
Was it all?
This is for the lodging tax,
Okay.
this is for the Humane Society, this is for the debt service with the
Okay.
Is that all?
Is that all the packet? This looks about, looks about right.
The
Tell us what you have.
This big.
But I need this back.
Yeah, no, I'll give it back.
He's gonna go photocopy it. So if you got notes on there you don't wanna have.
Yeah, that's.
Oh, that's back there. Okay.
All of those.
That whole packet. Humane Society
Yes.
and Humane Society
And enhancements.
and enhanced. Where's the enhancement right here? Oh,
I just need it back, that's the only thing I have left.
I didn't even see this one. Okay. And the enhancements. Okay, let me go make a copy real quick. 2 copies I was told?
Don't you want a copy?
I've got one. I just didn't bring it.
Okay. You don't want one tonight?
Yeah, I should probably grab one. I should probably grab one.
So 3.
Grab another cookie.
Yeah.
They all went outside, or, the mayor went to make photocopies. They don't know where everyone else is. It was a mass exodus.
Yeah, I guess. Good God. You're around for 1 minute, everybody can manage to run in.
Carl doesn't look like he feels good, does he? And then his employer, I forget what date, I guess, has been exposed.
Oh, this time of year, I think out there, it's freezing one minute and then the next. Horrible time of year to have to be outside. So we covered these two things, so what's the next one? Enhancements or liabilities? I think the reason Ben wanted this is because we need to know how much is left on the budget.
Yes, I do. I mean, I want to murder him.
Yep.
Thank God he wasn't like me when I was getting more.
Big time.
Well, I mean, he's going to take the fine.
5 minutes, 10 minutes back.
You know your cookies, you want to know that, right?
Yeah.
She realized the plate was for me. She made it nice, like, you guys can have one if you want, but only one. The rest is for Ben.
Thank you.
You guys. Go. All right. Hurry up. Okay. I'm coming in for that right now. Ouch, damn it.
That isn't even going to be left.
I know, Ben's eating them all.
It's going to be on sugar high.
Where's, he already is. He's turned into... Where's Tracy Coleman? Let's see, okay, this is still going. Oh, she can't hear me. Okay. Tracy, are you on here? Where are you?
This conference will now be
She gone?
recorded.
Did Tracy leave? Okay, fine. I was going to eat this cookie in front of her just for fun. Okay. I'm glad there's a lot of. All right. It is 8:20. We're back in workshop again. I'll open it back up to council. Seeing nothing else, the budget must be perfect now. Oh, our thorn is still on break?
Yeah. Carl's saying something, I don't know.
Carl, you got something?
Do I, Will?
Do you have anything?
No, sir, no, I don't.
Okay. Let's see here. We'll kill some airtime here. Okay, we went through that. I think the enhancements here, let's see. It was requested that a list of enhancements be given, which you see in front of you now. I don't think we talked about that. We're waiting for more discussion here. Got rid of that. And I think we've already reviewed the lodging tax dollars there. And then we've got what else is on here? Our liabilities as well. So, kicking it back to you. Anything else? Mr. Fredericks.
We were talking about the enhancement requests, correct?
Oh, I'm just saying you've got these in front of you, that's all. So yes, if you'd like to
Okay.
discuss those, we can. It's up to you.
So asking to have one of these funded means the way you would pay for it would be by either reducing other expenditures or spending this money out of either ending fund balance out of that department or general reserves, 301.
Yes, that's correct. With the exception of, I guess when we look at the police, you've got Prop 1, you got 4 items out of there that are Prop 1 dollars that could be spent on, Prop 1 dollars can be spent on those 4 line items. The other ones I would say yes. With those 4, as Mr. Boyce had stated, please be conservative with the fact that we're trying to keep a balance in that account or on those restricted funds. But the other ones, yes, would fall into, with the exception of I believe I guess all the others would fall into your last statement. Something would have to be reduced or it would have to come out of reserves to fund.
I have a question. So one of these is for the clerk treasurer's office, because it's indicating stormwater, water, sewer. So that position, is that supposed to tell me that position would be needed because of the stormwater utility now, but we haven't decided whether or not it's going to get farmed out to another agency?
Well, this line item would be, it appears to me that this would be the monthly billing, and you did receive a printout last week in regards to going to monthly billing and the cost associated with that. But that cost is built into the rate. This here would be an additional employee and Mrs. Ripp is not on here. Mr. Boyce, maybe you can answer that question. The FTE utility clerk for monthly billing, it's suggested here that an additional employee would have to be hired to conduct monthly billing.
Right, so our utility clerk right now, our existing one, is paid based on the amount of work she puts in for water, sewer, garbage recycling, and her salary is allotted based on that percentage. So if we went to monthly billing and had to hire or contract out additional help, that cost would also be allocated to those budgets that are receiving the service.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, kinda.
Mr. Fredericks?
Maybe I'm a little confused,
There you go.
but it would seem to me that if you have a clerk already doing that, couldn't you just use the same clerk?
Potentially, I guess. It's being asserted here that, I don't have the printout in front of me. Yes, that one right there. There's a number of bullet points and information that have been provided from the outsourcing company that are on there.
But didn't they say it was overstated?
I believe that's one statement that's on that email,
Yes.
yes.
Seems to be a very large disconnect between what the vendor is suggesting and what city staff is talking about here in this email. We will still have, will we not still have calls from folks that have a high bill?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say yes, because I would assume that that would still be occurring. And for the record, I believe that, and Ms. Coleman, you could jump in on this one as well. FCS provided two rates, I believe, to go to monthly billing. It was half a percent or something, or does that sound about right? 1%, 0.5% increase in order to do that?
I don't remember what the actual percentage
It was very small.
I'm looking at all the, I apologize for that, I don't know off the top of my head. Pete, do you remember what it was for monthly versus which we're at right now? It wasn't,
It was less than it was less than a percentage point.
it was, and I don't believe that it incurred a full FTE. It was only a part-time FTE, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the document to see exactly.
And
I can look that up while you're discussing.
And what did the rates that were approved by council to move forward so far with first reading, did that include monthly billing or no monthly billing?
I believe it was no monthly billing.
No monthly billing. So that would have to be built in. I wasn't sure if we'd done that or not. Mr. Fredericks?
I'm checking right now just to double check that.
Okay, thank you.
So in essence, we're not really reducing staff here, we're restructuring what we're doing currently, right?
I would agree with that statement.
Okay.
And from my standpoint, I think that customer service is absolute foremost, and if there's an improvement in a service that we can provide, I would say that we should at least explore it, which we have, and I would encourage council to go with that service. I'm not, when it comes to the hiring, I can't answer that. I don't work in that department on a daily basis, but if there's an improvement to a customer service component here to make it easy for the end user, then I would highly suggest that we explore that and take it seriously.
Okay, well, I don't mean to put Mr. Boyce on the spot, but Mr. Boyce, do you think that going to monthly billing would require additional staffing?
Thank
Actually, I do.
Okay.
One of the items that really dictates that additional help is needed is that we're going to have an overlap regarding the delinquent accounts, and with the door hangers, the follow-up beyond that. So we're going to be having some overlap with new billing going out and then tying up the last period's billing with those accounts that are in arrears.
Don't we do that already?
We do, but there's a 2-month period there's a 2-month period to cycle through the door hangers and the shutoffs and the other items like that. Yes, some do go over, but it is a labor-intensive issue when we're dealing with some of those accounts. And when you are generating new billing statements, it can be an issue, and it will take additional time to get through it.
How much time do you think it would take? I mean, ballpark in it. I know you don't have an exact number, but does the time let me break it down. Does the time that it'll take to do that justify the expense of another person?
Well, it's really a policy call. I think some city councilors have made the argument, which I think is on point, that most people, when they budget for their expenses, look at things on a monthly basis. That's the way almost every personal expenditure a person has comes in. So I think in that regard, it would be much more customer friendly. But there is a premium that has to be paid for that. I believe Director Coleman's looking it up now to see exactly what the difference is, but it's less than a percentage point.
Yeah, Miss Coleman's raising her hand. I think she's ready to report here.
Okay.
Yeah, the council did approve to go to monthly billing, so that's one of the things that I wanted to share.
They did? Okay. Okay.
Yep, council approved monthly billing. We're talking 0.5%. And let's see what else. What was the other question you had?
I think it came to workload, were the other questions.
Okay, so workload, it wasn't a full-time FTE. I'm looking that up still, so I'll keep going on that one. So
there was a recommendation there was a full recommendation from SES on how to proceed and what that looked like, correct?
That's correct. Okay. And yes, and I'm looking up the FTE because it was in an Excel spreadsheet. And so I will find that and raise my hand when I have that.
Okay. I guess my question, and I don't know if council has this question, but as I look at this, and I wish that Mrs. Ripp was on here so I could ask the question, is there a reason why we would hire at a clerk 4, and not at a lower rate of pay for a new employee?
My recommendation is with the existing staff that we have who is experienced, my recommendation would be to hire somebody at a lower level to learn that position. But I do not run that department, and Mary might have some other insight that I have to add to that. Pete?
Well, when you look at the job descriptions, the clerk 4 is the description that would most represent the duties that need to be done to complete this work.
Okay.
So, it is dictated partially by our negotiations with the union, but currently we have a clerk 4 performing utility duties, and if you look at the job description, it would fall in line with the clerk 4 position.
And one follow-up question. It sounds to me then that it looks like we would be looking at existing employees for employee development to move into this, and then hire at a lower rate for more of an entry level in one of those positions that is vacated then.
So the union contract dictates that we advertise within the union. We can advertise outside at the same time. If someone meets the minimum qualifications for the position, then we're required to give them a shot at performing those duties. So we set up a time period where They would be trained. When you talk about minimum qualifications, what it really means is they'd be up and ready to go into the position with, a small amount of training.
Okay.
If not, then we could look outside.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Boyce. Mr. Fredericks?
So to clarify the expense, where will the expense come from? My assumption is the expense would come from, and what is already baked into that 0.5% number, is that the money would come from the water and sewer funds? Is that correct?
Stormwater, water, sewer, and a portion would be coming from general fund.
What is the percentage that is coming from the general fund, and why?
And then I would follow up with that as well. This enhancement is asking for a full-time employee when FCS recommended a half-time. Is that correct? Is that what I just heard? Tracy?
I believe so.
Okay.
I'm still looking for that
Okay.
Excel spreadsheet.
So, Mr. Boyce, do we know the percentages from each of those accounts to pay for this line item?
Let me see if I can find that.
Okay.
It would seem to me that it would be 50% from sewer and 50% from water, or in a small portion of the stormwater, but that's, I would think not.
Do we, our current utility clerk is paid in this manner without the stormwater general fund, water and sewer funds?
Yes, and I believe garbage and recycling is a portion of that also.
Okay.
I'm trying to find the spreadsheet that outlines the percentages. Just give me a moment here.
But since council has already approved this through the water, since what we've already passed,
The monthly billing portion.
the monthly billing portion,
Yes.
it would seem that the
That's
next...
page 14 of the attachment for tonight's hearing.
Gold star for Travis. Tracy.
I realized we had a page 14.
No pressure. It's been noted. That's twice in one day. I'm so impressed, Travis. Well done. Okay. Do you guys have page 14, or are they... Mr. Bush, are you pulling that up?
I'm attempting to...
Sorry, Mr. Fitchett, sorry that we cut you off. So the assumption is that we are moving towards monthly billing due to the fact that the rate had already... The last action that was taken already included that.
So the next logical step in my mind would be that you'd approve at least a part-time position for this, because it's going to be funded by the previous action taken by council. Somebody
Can I ask a question?
Mrs. Holland.
So the email regarding farming out the utility billing,
Uh-huh.
if I read this correctly, by doing monthly billing, we save $30,000 hiring them to do it.
Let me get to that page. Is that on page...
It's the one where it's like mostly red.
Oh, okay, page 3, on page 3 of the email. It's stating that they're asserting that it would be, which this cost is covered through the utility rate, I believe, outsourcing less staff at $60,000, other costs for outsourcing, a total year one cost at $157,210. That's...
But if we keep it in-house, it's $181,514.
correct.
Is that including the part-time?
This is farming it out to
I know.
that.
No, I'm saying in-house. Is that including the part-time?
No, I believe that's including, let me go up here real quick.
So if we farm, so just so I understand, so if we farm it out to this company, who's $30,000 less, we wouldn't have to hire a part-time person, because the existing staff members would not be doing all of these other thingies. They could then focus their attention on apparently all the waste control complaints that they get and dealing with past due accounts.
That's what, and I don't know how to say the company, Meinl, is it? Meinl? Meinl. That's what, based on the information that was provided by staff, that's what they're saying, yes.
So we would save 30 grand, free up time for the clerk treasurer's office to focus their attentions on clerk treasury things, whatever that is, and not utility bills and receiving payments, correct?
That's what they're stating, yes. I believe so. I mean, if you look at the list of items that is done by the clerk treasurer's office and the breakdown here by going to monthly billing, they're stating that some of those things that, I'm summarizing the email, obviously, based on some of the red bullet points here, is that they would eliminate some of those daily obstacles.
So the logical question would be, why do you need another person then?
Yeah.
Mr. Boyce?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
All right, so on page...
You would have had to heard Ms. Holland's statement first in order to...
Yeah, okay, sorry. Did you hear Ms. Holland's opening statement there that I responded to? No. Okay, so Ms. Holland, on page 3 of the email that was provided last week, Meinl is, based on the calculations provided in this email by staff, they're stating that in lieu of hiring if we were to go through with the FCS recommendation, we would have an annual cost of $181,514 in year 1 and 2. They're saying that they can actually take care of that, and there would not be a need for staff in-house, reducing that by almost $30,000. Ms. Holland's comment after that was that if we didn't hire more, if we outsourced the whole program, or the majority of the program, the challenges that are stated in this email would be mitigated by the outsourcing to Meinl, and the additional FTE would not be needed. Did I summarize that okay?
That could be the case. And I need to remind council, too, there may be some union issues associated with the outsourcing that we'd need to work through. I'm talking with our labor attorney right now to see what that would entail, and I'll report back as soon as I can. But I think Ms. Holland is correct in her assessment.
Well, I'm glad to see that the union runs the city.
Well,
They do.
but
The state,
the thing is that
city.
I think what people forget is that this is like people's money here. And so if we can save $30,000 to go towards whatever, since we have no real, in case of emergency fund anymore, because that's apparently been tapped. So instead of 3 months of in case of emergency, we have 1.
And just for the record, it's not that we tapped it, we just haven't been able to grow it. We've been at 1 since I've been here.
So there you go. So we can have an emergency for 1 month in Woodland, and then we can't have an emergency anymore. So the thing that kind of just, I've lived here almost my whole life, and what just blows my mind is that we have, let's hire more people because we don't have enough people to do all the things. But then when we look at ways to free up their time so they can focus their attentions on other things and not receiving bills and, I guess, I don't even know what all they do. Send out bills and receive money and record it. So if another company is going to do that, that frees up all 30 grand and a bunch of time. It seems like a win to me. Like, why would you not? Like, I'm in an industry where there's things that I am not set up to do, so we farm it out to other companies who that's their gig, right? It sounds like these guys, with all of the things that they had, were all the cities that they're working with, these are like legitimate cities who've never had a problem with them and over 6 years' time have not ended their contract. So clearly they're doing something right. So if we decided that it's going to be a monthly billing cycle, and now it's going to cost Woodlanders a gob more money, and God forbid we should farm it out to a company that's all they do, because, oh, the union's got to get involved. Oh, and I remember it was $200 an hour for the labor attorney. So, I mean, it's ridiculous. As a Woodlander, it's ridiculous. Here we're trying to find solutions. Isn't that kind of the whole goal of these workshops? Find solutions and save Woodlanders money. And I'm sorry if I'm being annoying or anything, but it's just like my head is like,
You go.
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
No, I'm right on board with you.
and then to see that it's don't renew your contract with waste control because that's who we have all the complaints about. Well, who's going to come and get our garbage then? Because I think it was Ted Sanitation sold his company years ago. It stopped being a single guy operation, gosh, when I was a kid. Anyway, I'm done.
Mr. Smith.
Or to speak on, as far as the union being sanitary, I've been union most of my life, and I have decent benefits, I have a decent retirement, and I'm pretty sure I'm never going to give that up. I understand the aspect of the union, and the city has made agreements with the union, which is, the union is essentially the members in that agreement. So the city has made these agreements, and for now, if the city wants to try to go back on that, there's going to be issues with it. So if the contract says that they can do this, it will cause issues, it will cause lawsuits, and that will cost the city money.
Mr. Fredericks?
And I think some of this challenge we have to keep in mind is issues that occur in Olympia. And I spoke about this before, that, I thought I could get on council and I thought I could change the world and I thought I could do things differently. But what I have found is that Olympia has in this state, has a over-the-top, in my opinion, pro-union attitude. And we are in what I would consider middle-of-the-road, conservative-leaning Woodland, Cowlitz County, and I think that is what I struggle with a lot, is I would like to be able to do something. I'd like to be able to say, Mr. Boyce, I want you to move forward, and I want you to do whatever you want in the office, in the clerk-treasurer's office, but every time that we've had this discussions, there's always limitations on what you can do, and it's extremely frustrating when you're trying to do what we are trying to do on behalf of the taxpayer, that we will sometimes end up spending more money on. So we'll spend $50,000 to, as an example, to save 30. It's just the nature of what we're going to do. And I would argue that it's really difficult because it creates we're so not flexible. So I can't say, well, you're doing this job today, but tomorrow I'm going to add this job to you. Well, no, that's not in the contract. That's not, what we agreed to. I'm not doing that work. And I think that's what the frustrating thing is because we could move forward with a full-time employee in that department, another one, only to find out that there's 20 hours worth of work. And we can't reassign an additional 20 hours worth of doing something else without having to jump through a tremendous amount of hoops. And I think that's the frustrating part, is that you're just hamstrung to only be able to do a certain thing and to try to be more efficient and effective with the resources that we're given to run the city, in essence. And that's frustrating. But
Mr. Smith?
All valid arguments. The only thing I would add is, I think with having Pete in there and actually having a city administrator, I think this can start to be resolved through the bargaining process that they have. Now that you have somebody who's in there more fluently, he can take these issues when they go into bargaining and they can start addressing this and they can start correcting the contract modifications that they want to do when bargaining time comes around.
I'd like to say for the record, too, that outsourcing this item, just for clarification and for everybody that's listening, doesn't reduce employees. I just want to make sure that we're all on,
Yeah.
that we all understand that we're not reducing anyone. The outsourcing is being suggested that a half-time employee be hired to assist with this. The clerk treasurer's office is asking for a full-time employee to assist with this. The outsourcing company is stating that they can do it without having to hire anyone, but there's no suggestion of losing anyone in the clerk treasurer's office. I just want to make sure that I make that very clear. Current staff stays. We're strictly speaking to the additional staff. So, Mr. Smith, I understand your statements. We're not losing union employees. This would be an additional, but we do have a company that's saying we can do it without putting the expense on the city. That's all.
That's what I don't understand, what the complaint would be. All I have heard for the last 5 years, since I started coming to meetings, was we need more people because there's just so much stuff to do. So much stuff to do, we need more people, and every year, y'all give them more people, right? So that's an unsustainable payroll situation right there. Because there's so much stuff to do, so we find this thing that takes up so much time that we could have done somewhere else for less money, freeing up their time to do other things, keeping all existing staff employed, but they could do all those things they say they can't get done because of the billing, but they're going to complain, and it requires a labor attorney.
Well, in all fairness, I don't think it'll be the employees complaining. It'll be the union that files whatever, the lawsuits or whatever, because basically they're not going to be getting their money from a new employee.
But, so
all about
that's really what it's about, is to hire another person, not the fact that we're giving them, taking something off their plate.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about it. I mean, this might just be me, and this is no offense to you or your union people. I'm not a big union guy. I've been in unions before, and they've never done a damn thing for me. So all full disclosure, I do have a little case of the ass when it comes to unions. That said, in this situation that we're talking about, we're not talking about screwing any workers over. We're not talking about taking away any workers' rights. We're not talking about not promoting somebody or anything else that historically unions are supposed to be taking care of for the employees. We're just talking about saving the city money and outsourcing to another place. So the fact that hypothetically a union may file grievances or drop lawsuits against the city for us doing our jobs and trying to save the citizens money, I look at it as them kind of like holding a gun to my head. I don't like it, and personally, I would rather go through the lawsuits than drop down to my knees and kiss the shoes of the union just because they say that's what we have to do. So that's my soapbox moment.
Mr. Smith?
So as far as a grievance process, more than likely it's not started by the rep at the union. It's started by a member on site. He will file a grievance with the rep, and that will start the process going. It would start with the employees at that point. As far as whether or not we can do this, my argument's not whether we can do it or not. I don't know what the contract reads. I'm assuming that's up to Pete to try to figure out if it can be done, and then bring that back to us and say that, yes, I think we can do it and it will not be a violation of the contract, or no, I think it would be an issue and I think we need to talk to the union and see if it's going to be an issue and bring it back to us and give us all the facts so that we can make a proper decision.
Mr. Fredericks?
I think we've already made that proper decision, whether it be proper or improper. I think we've already made, the ship has sailed as far as that, but I think there's further discussion that should be required on that. I would say, just to point out, I heard the term that we're adding and adding people. We actually have less people in the clerk treasurer's department than we did in 2010. We've not increased any additional staff for that. As a matter of fact, we actually do not have the half-time records account clerk anymore. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we actually have...
We did, the city went through some reductions that you're aware of at the beginning of COVID, and those have not been reinstated at this
So
time.
we have the same amount of staffing that we've had in that department for over, I want to say 12 years now, and probably earlier than that. So, but that could be said for almost every department in the city. Our Public Works Department has the same number, or maybe even less, and I know Ms. Coleman could speak to that. We have, I think, the same amount of people in that department since I joined the council in late 2008.
Well, we might be back to there. We did reduce down by 2.
Okay, so it's further, because we don't have summer laborers anymore.
Correct.
Ms. Coleman, can you just speak to the staffing? It's been a long time since you've added another employee in that department.
Yeah, we've actually been low, a minimum of 1 employee for a number of years, and this, when I came on board after the first year, we were able to add that person back on, and then we hired 1 additional that was in need. And we have given up all of our park labor. So the part-time park staff, as you know, I've given that up 2 years in a row to try to keep on 1 full-time employee. But we are actually down 2 full-time employees from what we've been in the past. And we have given up that park labor, just an FYI. But I also wanted to share with you, too, that in regards to the billing, the spreadsheet that was provided to us from FCS Group was the cost for monthly billing go to late fee mailing costs, monthly mailing of bills and invoices, additional contract meter reading costs, so we have to have somebody come out and read the meters again every month versus every other month. They show a 20% increase in supervisory time. And then we have a new clerk 3, not a clerk 4, it's a clerk 3 position for a full-time employee, 1 full-time employee and benefits. And then also we have some time down there, which is very minimal, $500 worth, that is for public works maintenance workers for additional final readings. So anytime we have our vendor come in and do the contract, the meter reading, many times they miss a handful of meters, and any given month it's 20 to 40. Every other month it's 20 to 40 meters that we have to go out and we have to read them because they've been missed by the contract biller, by the contract reader. I apologize. So the cost, if you look at the percentages, the largest cost here is the contract metered reading costs for it every month, 20% of supervisor time, and the full-time clerk. The late mailing and the public works is, I'm going to look at the totals here and tell you what we're talking about real quick here. So if we look at an overall cost, the sum of the clerk 3 position for salary and benefits is about 26, let me look here, make sure I tell you the right, 26,000 for the year. That cost is being equally divided amongst water, sewer, and garbage. So 33% out of water, 33% out of sewer, and 33% in garbage. The maintenance worker for Public Works got rereads, they have $500. I mean, minimal, percentage-wise. Supervisory time, they have $6,000. And then the additional contract meter reading is about $5,000. And then sending out re-invoices and monthly billing, they have about $1,500. So the largest cost on that is that new clerk 3 for full-time salary and benefits, and they're at about $27,000, just an FYI, and that's how the cost is being divided out. Did I answer that question now? Sorry, it took me so long to find.
Yes, I just wanted to correct the statement that we've been hiring people, because we have not been hiring people. And I just want to be clear with that we're not adding additional employees. The only department that has seen growth has been the police department from a standpoint of more employees. And so I just wanted to make sure we correct the record on that. And yes, I appreciate your answer on the other additional information.
Can I ask why we have a meter reader who misses 40 houses? Like, so I would think that public works employees get paid more than what we pay a meter reader. And if the public works department has actual pressing jobs that they need to work on, it's kind of redundant to send them out to read meters that someone is contracted, that's all their job is to read meters. Like, am I the only one bothered with that? The
No.
20 to 40 meters a month or whatever?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
They miss?
Mr. Boyce?
Yeah, and most of the time, it's not that they missed reading a meter, but when the billing goes out, there's something that doesn't make sense. Maybe the meter was read wrong. Sometimes they're not able to access the meter because, a gate or something's been put in front of it. So it's not always that they missed the reading. Sometimes it's the reading didn't make sense. Maybe they read it correctly, but the customer has a leak. Or they read it correctly and the customer left town, so there was no usage. So we do follow up on some of those, sometimes at the request of the customer, and sometimes it's proactive from the utility billing clerk wanting to make sure an accurate bill is being sent.
I'd just say I know somebody who had a padlock, did not know they had a padlock on their meter for 10 years that they lived in their home. So we always wondered how they actually read the meter and determined their bill. Just want to put that out there. So, and she used to sit here, so I just think that's kind of interesting, but anybody else want to go on a tangent about enhancements?
My rant for the night.
Mr. Fredericks?
So I just want to clarify that since the council has moved forward with the monthly billing, my assumption would be that since that's what we've asked for, is going to be changed in the budget to accommodate the request.
I believe it already has been put into the budget. Is that correct? Well, I guess we just made the change, or just approved first reading.
It's currently in the budget.
And so that accommodates any additional staff that may be needed.
Correct. So the question really is more on the contracting point of view. So if the city ends up contracting that service, we may have to move some funds, and maybe it could even be a reduction at some point.
Okay.
Well, is there a way that we can look and see what the contract does say to see if going with somebody else is even an option at this point? Well,
right,
it's
Mr.
an
Mayor?
option.
Yes,
I
go
also
ahead.
have an option. Never mind.
So I'm consulting with the labor attorney. I've had a conversation with the union representative. The union hasn't stated, what they intend to do or not do. They've just told us, or put us on notice, that they consider utility billing union work. So the contract itself doesn't define what union work is. However, there are, case law out there that talks about and gives guidance as far as what union work is. So what I'm attempting to do right now is to get some good legal advice, engage in a conversation with the union representative, and see if we can come to some resolution. Part of the question was, how much work do we put into it until it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. How much work do we put into it at this point before we know if council wants to go that route? And council can't really make that decision until you get more information. So what I'm attempting to do right now is get you some good information about what could happen, what the risks are, what the benefits are, what costs might be incurred by the city, or what money may be saved by the city. So as soon as I have that information, I'll report back to council, and we'll go from there. But we'll try to give you enough good information that you can make a sound decision.
Mr. Boyce, hasn't the ship already sailed?
Excuse me?
Hasn't the ship already sailed? Mr. Fredericks asked.
Well, I'm not sure what respect you mean.
Well, so here's what I'm saying, I guess. So if we've moved forward with adopting that already, is the suggestion that you're going to come back to us and say, we just can't do it? Here's your choices. It's a bad choice A or bad choice B. Either one's a bad choice. And we want to go with the good choice that we've already made.
I think the question is, to accomplish a monthly billing, which council said we want monthly billing, what's the best way to do that? Is it an in-house employee, or is it contracting that service? So that's where I see the question being.
And to be clear, we're not changing anybody's job. Maybe they might do something different when they come to work, but they still have a union job, they still have union benefits, they may be asked to do something other than, say, water and sewer billing. Maybe we have them do some records retention. We're not asking for a pay cut. We might have them job shadow. We could maybe work on some cross-training, get people cross-trained in the office. There seems to be so many other things that are being requested on here that clerk could do. Is that not an option?
It's in the contract.
And we'll be discussing that with the union.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to that. I look forward to that discussion.
I guess my closing statement, and hopefully we can wrap this up and move on to the next item, is that there are a number of cities that are already completing this, and I'm sure that there have been some challenges and a learning curve, or past practice, or not past practices, discussions that could be had with how they perhaps overcame.
Got around the union.
Overcame their challenge. Mr. Smith.
That would be the benefit of having somebody in there long-term to start keeping track of this, and so that they can go and make the corrections that are needed, because nothing's done quickly with any city or government.
And here's another thing I can tell you from my past experience. My past experience tells me if it's new and it's coming to Woodland, unless there's total agreement by everybody, it isn't going to happen. And I see this time and time again since I've been here. It's like, can't do this because it's new. And that's not the way we've always done it. And I guess what I'm saying is, it's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. That's why in my mind, that's why we're trying to change it and move forward with something different. Sometimes there's a better way of doing things, and I think that needs to be recognized, that maybe the way we've always been doing it isn't the best way of doing it. And I think that that's a challenge for some people that are set in their ways, and I've just seen it time and time again. So hopefully we can execute on this request by council.
Anything else on the enhancement list?
I think we beat that thing down to the ground.
Mr. Fredericks.
The emergency generator that is a $25,000 request. Tell me a little bit about, I don't know if Chief Kelly can hear me, about why you want to move forward with that. I have an understanding, but I get it by what you're asking for here, but help me understand a little bit more.
Well, we're kind of a central hub for, maybe, and I don't want to say it out loud, but potential natural disasters. The city has been a victim of a couple in the recent past, and the way our facility is built, there is no sustainable resources within the city if we were to become the south end of College County, north end of Clark County Emergency Operations Center. Emergency generator would keep us functioning for whatever time we can in order to potentially save the lives of the citizens of Woodland and the surrounding area. If we had a generator that would maintain, that would help us to maintain communications, data exchange, and the like. And we don't have any of that. However, they do have one across the other side of the parking lot that they're able to sustain business during a natural disaster. And that's the only reason I'm asking for it. We don't have adequate communications in this building now as it stands, but if the council decided to move forward on an emergency generator, that would get the ball rolling towards it.
Mr. Chief Kelly, when you're saying the other side of the parking lot, I'm assuming you're referring to the fire department?
That's correct.
Okay. It would seem to me that out of the roughly $200,000 that we have of Prop 1 money from 2020, it would seem to me that that would be a prudent expense of $25,000 on behalf of the citizens of Woodland to make sure that we are operational in a
Disaster.
some sort of an event. I'd rather be proactive about something like that than to have an issue and end up having to be reactive and say, why didn't you plan better for this?
Along those same lines, I would also ask that council consider the $3,500 request as well. I believe it's line 3 on the enhancement.
GB cable?
Yes, to allow for that service to come in here as well. In my real job in life, that is my job, is to communicate and to work out of the types of centers that Chief Kelly has just described. That is an essential service, and if this is our central communication point for the south end of the county, not to mention the Yell Valley and the city of Woodland ourselves, and more than likely Kalama as well, it would be in our best interest, I believe, to make sure that our infrastructure here at this building is at what we can. It's not a huge expense, but it is a service that I think that we should have. There's a number of items that come across that service to include news broadcasts, emergency services, and those types of things. So when you're looking at the generator as an option to keep this building going during an emergency, I'd also encourage you to also couple that with the line 3 of that enhancement request as well.
And that comes from the general fund.
Unfortunately, yes, unless we cut something somewhere else.
It comes from the general fund, but should be duly noted that it was a public safety expense and should be subtracted from that final balance of $199. And I think that's something that should actually be spent this year, right now. Or start the process. That's just me. I'm only one member. I can't approve a budget change for one member, but
I would actually definitely go along with that. After sitting at City Hall downtown, we flooded in '96. Yeah, that was quite.
So Mr. Kelly, or Chief Kelly, is absolutely correct when he says that Woodland seems to be an epicenter for, we were an epicenter for, many of you might remember, I wasn't around, I wasn't all that old, but D.B. Cooper, that was all done in Woodland City Hall. We also had Mount St. Helens, which was also at the old City Hall. So, and I think 1996, when we had our flood, that was also done.
Correct.
That was the command center there. So
Our landslides in 2015 and 17, I believe, was also, this was the hub for that as well.
you know, so.
This
In
actual.
1996.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So I don't think if there's no objection, or if it's okay if someone objects, but I think it would be prudent to move forward with that request now. And
You have a number of subject matter experts to include the chief Jackson, myself included, I would say, on that as well. Mr. Smith.
So that television or similar product I'm assuming that's paying for cable, so that would be a yearly cost.
An annual, ongoing, yes. And Ms. Coleman might be able, the chief and I were discussing this at a earlier time. Ms. Coleman, is there a public, are you aware of a public billing that comes from the cable servicer for a public price for public entities? That's a lesser rate.
You're talking about a public billing for cable. Are you talking about for a wastewater plant or water plant? What are you talking about?
No. Is there a public rate, for public entities? Is there a lesser rate than they charge like a residential customer?
No, actually, no, not at all. We have, sometimes they'll provide us a service over a residential customer. If they have outages, they'll try to get us on, but that's few and far between. We've had problems with our service at the water plant when our SCADA system goes down. So, no, we don't get any discount for being a municipality from cable or phone that I am aware of.
At one point, if you could do me a favor, at one point there was discussion that if it was shown in, if the average person could walk into the building and see the cable playing or the TV running, that it was a service that was provided for free because it was to the general public.
So my understanding is we did receive at our Public Works shop, the cable service was provided for free because we had another service, I'm talking about the TV, we had another service that was paid for, so they gave that to us for free. I don't know if that's for free any longer. Okay. I needed to put Mary on that because I know we had talked about that at one time and it was, but I'm not sure if it still is.
Okay, thank you. Did I hear an objection?
So the cost could be lower for cable this year if we started it for this year.
Possible. Yeah, I guess we just have to make some calls and find out.
I'm not opposed to it if we want to start the process going.
Yeah. Silence is,
yes.
What about Carl? What does Carl have to say?
Carl, you got anything on this one?
Carl was even here.
Well, maybe a little bit, Will. You were talking those other entities. Could we reach out to them for maybe some money to get this generator because we are helping them out too?
Asking who? I'm sorry, you cut out.
Washington State Patrol.
Some of the other
All those other entities you're talking about, because we're the gateway and helping the main hub right here.
Okay, all right.
If we could just
That's good.
If we could just get our 20% tax or public safety tax back from the county, it would easily fund. It would easily fund that generator.
I'll write the letter myself and send it to the board.
Taxpayers are already paying for it, so.
I'm sure they're dying to hear from me. No, that's a good point, Carl. Okay. All right. Anything else on the enhancement list or discussion on that? Mrs. Holland.
Something I've always wondered, did we, the city of Woodland, buy the city hall building? The annex, whatever building you're in right now. Is it rented or do you own it?
We own it. We own that building and we own 100 Davison.
Would you like to buy it?
Well, here's the thing, is so it says upgrade HVAC at City Hall. And so what I'm thinking is because that building is like as far back as I can remember, my thought is maybe you don't drop a bunch of money on an HVAC system in a building that the roof leaks every winter and it costs a bunch of money and the insurance rates I'm sure go up because it floods every winter. So my question is that what's wrong with the
Ms. Coleman, can you
heating
speak?
and air currently?
I know Ms. Coleman has had some folks in there inspecting that and going through it. The HVAC system at City Hall is listed on the enhancement. Can you speak to that item? Mrs. Holland is stating, why would we upgrade it in an old building that leaks? And is it necessary?
Actually, the roof was replaced, I should say.
We're no longer leaking.
Good job.
Thank you. Is it necessary to invest in the item?
One of the items that we looked at is the HVAC system, because it doesn't adequately heat or cool the entire building as it should. And then also with Public Works moving over to the facility, there's another room that we need to provide ventilation to. And so what we were looking at is two items. First of all, updating the current system to adequately supply even heat and cool throughout the building, and then also some additional ventilation, and see if we can bump up that filtration system that would maybe filter some of the virus in the air. Not so much COVID-19, but another filtration system, like bump it up from a 13 filter to a 15 or 18, that would help with some of the, I guess, cold and bacteria that is filtered in the air system from the building. But the main reason why we had that on there is, and Pete, you can jump into, is there was some CARES Act money that might be available to upgrade the system, and since we were moving more people into the building, we had looked at that CARES Act funding. But I'm going to let Pete speak a little bit more about that and what your thoughts are, Pete.
Yeah, so really the main issue is up front. Especially during the summer, you can get temperatures in the upper 70s. My office in the back, I've got a little thermometer in here. I've got, it can get down to 56. So I have a little space heater. It works for me. But when we turn the AC up to help the folks in the front, the community development office and other places in the building get very cold. And it's just uneven heating and cooling. At this point, I don't believe we're going to be able to use CARES Act dollars to help cover the cost. So if we do this, it's going to be a general fund expense.
I think Carl has a question.
Who does?
I think Carl.
Carl, did you have a question?
No, I just put my thumb over the, yeah.
Thank you, Carl. Who was asking about the HVAC system? Mrs. Holland. Further question on that, or was there?
Well, so enhancements, where's this money coming from? Where are we supposed to find it? Like the end fund balance from this year rolling into next year? Because, we didn't have, what is that thing called that you do every spring that gets put off forever?
Retreat.
That?
Yes.
Okay. So we didn't have that. We've not had anything, I only know how to apply it to stuff I don't do here, is you have a 5-year planning session, or a strategic planning session, where you kind of have all these things and you kind of map them out as to what you want to do. Council meetings really aren't for those. I think it's more about creating policy and stuff. But this is the only time this workshop's about the only time we get to discuss these things. But then nobody remembers them down the road. And there's some really valid, important ideas happening and some really good organic conversation happening. But is there a way that we could maybe figure out a time and do a 5-year planning session of what needs to happen over the next handful of years? You know what I mean? I've heard about City Hall for forever. Mm-hmm. I agree. It could just crack off the side of the, who knows? Because it's old. But so what do? We don't have a plan in place for that. You had ideas. You had, and a partnership with the visitor center that would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We have all these variables like the roundabout, that kind of stuff. But to do that, how to build up the, in case of emergency fund, how to get things in these enhancement lists that aren't necessarily able to be funded right now, but could be funded later. You know what I mean? Is that a thing that you could,
When you look at your list, some of the things that have been implemented over the years, which started right before I got here, especially with the police station when it came to, I believe the cars was one thing that Chief Gaucher started, was the rotation, making sure that equipment. Clerk Treasurer's Office is very good about rotating out our technology, making sure that our computers are on a rotational basis in there. So we've got those funds set up and those plans are in place to keep us up and going that way. So each department has their things that they do in order to do equipment replacement. Some of those bigger items, such as like City Hall and the Visitor Center, those types of things, until we get to a point, and this is me talking now from my mindset, and Mr. Boyce and I are on the same page with this, until we get to a point where our reserve account is at that emergency level, we can't really plan for building a new City Hall, and that's why we try to get so creative with the grants and trying to figure out how we can partner with other agencies to make things happen, because until we get to that point where we feel comfortable that if there was an emergency, then we can start those conversations. But until now, we're band-aiding everything because we just don't have the available funding. Probably not what everybody wants to hear, right?
But
we try.
Shouldn't say that.
But we try. We try to do little fixes along the way to make it comfortable for folks and to move on. But until we get to the point that our reserves are at an acceptable level, we can't really plan ahead for the types of things that you described. Mr. Fredericks.
In 2015, the city actually partnered with an outside, I want to say I'll say the word gentleman because I can't remember his name.
Yes.
And we did a strategic plan. Now, some on this council at the time we adopted disagreed with the plan, wanted to make some changes to it. We didn't move forward. But we do have a strategic plan that outlines the next 5, 10, and maybe even 15 years. And kind of the idea behind that, and I've always said that our strategic plan should be attached to our budget, because really this is our plan. We should be funding the plan through the budget. That's what we said we were going to do when we adopted the strategic plan. So I think it might be good, Mr. Boyce, if you could track down the strategic plan, the last one that was completed, that would be great, and then provide that to council to kind of see what it said. And it might be time for us to consider doing another strategic planning session.
I think I'll jump in real quick, Mr. Boyce, before you do. This is an ongoing conversation between Mr. Boyce and myself, something that we continually go back to when I first took over in 2016, that was my roadmap. But at the time, we didn't have a council that was cohesive to allow the implementation of that document. I tried. We just had some challenges, that's all. So Mr. Boyce and I, over the last few years, have been having that conversation of what does this look like? It needs to be updated. The former mayor is still at the front of that page. So one thing that we had discussed earlier in this year, going into our retreat that didn't happen because of COVID, was to update that document with council to give us our roadmap and to start that process again. We just haven't been able to have that conversation yet. But it is something that is on the front page of something that needs to be completed, and we're aware of that. But until we're able to get together and start having those conversations. Mr. Boyce?
No, I agree with you. I was going to mention that, yes, the strategic plan, it's due to be updated. So we need to make that happen. The mayor and I have talked about changing up the format a little bit. There's a lot of narrative in there right now that, doesn't seem very useful. But we need to have a conversation with council so council can direct us, as far as what the city priorities should be. I think we're all in agreement that really needs to happen.
Yeah, I will tell you that one of those items that was in that strategic plan was an additional park on the west side of town, whether it be small. That idea was brought forward to council because I thought it was in the plan. We had the opportunity to do it, and my side of the table, and I'm not throwing stones around, I'm just stating an example of trying to implement. We were told no, it wasn't necessary. We didn't want to invest in it. It wasn't a priority. But yet here it is in this document, and we're trying to move forward with this document, and we're told no. So I think that we do need to sit down and have a conversation to figure out where the temperature is and where
This
we need
isn't
to go
the
in.
dog park at I-5, right?
No.
Okay, I just-
That's on the east side?
Yeah, okay, excellent, okay.
No, not the dog park.
Now, it's my understanding that we would need help with this. This isn't something that we just, sit around the table and come up with a strategic plan. There's a kind of there's a lot of planning and of just the planning process. So is this something that we would typically hire out and have help with?
In my opinion, at this point, I would say no. Mr. Boyce has, he might have a different opinion because I'm answering for both of us right now. Mr. Boyce has sought out a really good some examples, and as we sat down and went through them, that we both agreed upon that a much simpler, non-cumbersome example than what we had before. We had a Bible before. Mr. Boyce has found an award-winning example that is one page.
The strategic plan for Cowlitz County is over 400 pages.
Well, so my question
Keep it
is,
simple.
so my question is, you need 2 more months of in case of emergency funds before we can do anything else.
My opinion.
So how do we?
Well, that council's direction. That's policy.
But that's, you just said that, so we can't really do that by hiring more people and doing more things from this, unless there's specific funding already available for that,
Get your contract more out.
right? So now I go back to the thing with the extra sales tax revenue stuff. How does that become a thing? How do we make that, like, there's a new business that nobody budgeted for,
Okay.
that there's more money? So I think you said that was a policy thing where we would have to make that an actual thing everybody voted on.
Similar to what Mr. Frederick brought up about restricting funds and starting that savings account and starting those processes, or putting the policies in place to allow for something down the road. Similar to a park impact fee. Look at a park impact fee. Anytime there's construction on a new resident, a little bit of money goes into an account, it's restricted funding, and we do a new park with it. Someday. Eventually, we just continue holding that money until it's time to pull the trigger and make it happen.
But we are compliant to a previous council's decision that there needs to be the 3-month, that was under Grover, correct?
It wasn't me.
That was a policy decision adopted, so the council did not have effective financial policies and procedures. So the council said, what optimally do we want and what is the standard? So we adopted a financial policies and procedure document, which is what we did, and the challenge is, that's what we want, that's the goal that we have to get to. Now, many could argue, we could definitely argue different ways to get there, what services we could cut, we could cut services, we could raise taxes, there's many ways of getting there, but I think it's been extremely painful to make some of those tough decisions about what you're going to, because that's where we're at. We can either cut, and I'm not sure we can raise all that much revenue, and I think that's the challenge we get to, is many of the cuts are painful, and they're things that the citizens of Woodland expect a city to be able to offer. And I think that's where that's at least been my perception of the struggle, and it's extremely uncomfortable. Because we're a small city, we all know who's in what position and who does what, and so it becomes personal. People have personal feelings about, how dare you make this decision because it's personal to me, it's my job, it's my livelihood. And we've actually had that where we've had people in the audience crying as we're approving a budget that has their job eliminated. And it's not a good place to be, but we've been there before. And I really think that's the challenge of what do we want to cut to say, we need to get to that 3-month number? How are we going to start doing it? And we could certainly do that. It just requires us to force certain things from a policy standpoint of saying, hey, we could direct staff. You need to find $100,000 in cuts because we want to put $100,000 towards our reserve fund that should have 3 months. Great. We can direct staff to say, we want you to find $100,000, or we can say, we set policy, the budget is ours, we're going to cut $100,000. Here's where we think it's appropriate to do, and we could meet at the finance committee and we could come up with these things, or we could direct staff to do it. That's one way. You can raise revenue. I think we have some room left on our utility tax. I mean, but I don't think there's appetite for that here. We could raise car tab fees for street maintenance because we know it needs to be done. I think that's a bad choice. I don't think that would go over well.
I would agree with you, that's a bad choice.
Especially since we've adopted a stormwater utility, which is supposed to help us with that. So there's ways of doing it, but all those ways are extremely uncomfortable. And it is frustrating because I would like to get to 6 months of expenditures or of revenue to pay for unexpected expenditures in a downturn. 2008, 2009 was very difficult, and that's when we had employees in the audience that were losing their jobs, and it was because you have a certain amount of revenue, you've got a certain amount of expense, and you have to. We're not like the federal government. We can't print money. We actually have to adopt a balanced budget. So, yeah, I get it. It's frustrating to get to that number, and we've actually stayed very stagnant on our general reserve, where it's just stayed right at $1 million in the 301 fund.
And it hasn't been without trying.
No.
Either. Over the last 5 years, we've really, I believe, and I'm very proud of the fact that we've reduced a lot of things, and I think Mr. Fredericks, you had said it during our last budget that you couldn't find anything to cut because we had already done that. And I think that the budget process now is coming down to a fine-tuning situation and prompting the conversations that you're having now of how do we get better at it. And Mr. Frederick's statements of, but we don't have the revenue, so what do we need to do as policymakers to get better? Because we have cut, I think that we've cut as much as we can.
And indeed, if this were a business, the model's too expensive, you'd close it down. You'd change the model.
Yes.
The challenge is we don't have the ability to change the model. As Mr. Smith on the end indicated, we don't have that ability to change the model. So I joked about it. I said, what do you think we should do? Close it down for 6 months and open it up under new management? And then there's nothing against, Mr. Boyce or the staff or anything, but if you were running a business, you wouldn't run that way, and that's probably why we don't run the city like we run a business. And it's unfortunate because when you look at our fixed costs are rising faster than the revenue's rising, and that is a recipe for disaster when your fixed cost, which in this case is high labor and high benefit expense.
It's unsustainable.
It is unsustainable. It is absolutely unsustainable, and we'll get to a point where we're going to have a day of reckoning. But that's not just going to be in the city of Woodland. That's going to be in the state of Washington, and it's most likely going to be at a federal level as well. And that's where it's at right now. And that's where it's been for many years in this state. And it's extremely frustrating.
The payroll thing where it's at, if I'm reading this correctly, it's just built into their contracts that they get a cost of living increase every year forever.
It's something that's negotiated along with some other items.
Yes.
So every year forever.
Not necessarily. There was a time where I believe that no increases were given. The time period that Mr. Frederick's referenced would be the downturn in the economy in 08 and 09. I believe that there was a time that the executive team did not receive an increase for 4 years, and they just started getting those, I think, again. I want to say maybe it stopped in 2012 or it started again in 2012. I can't.
But it should be noted for those years that they were not getting, and we've had an entire staff changeover, but the years that they were not getting increases, they were getting other maneuvers to be able to add significant amount of balances to their vacation time, which they had cashed out later. So there were ways that they were still getting increases even though they didn't get an increase. And those were policy decisions that were made by the mayor's office, the previous, not this mayor, previous two mayors. Actually, Mr. Lasicki did not agree to that, but it was the two mayors prior to him where staff got paid what I would consider flex time. And the definition of flex time was very loose. And so they were able to get a lot of their increase that way. But yeah, staff had for several years didn't, I think it was 4 years that they didn't get an increase. And in the downturn in the economy, we were literally at a point where it was, you can go ahead and have an increase, but we're going to have to terminate people. I mean, that's where we're at, because we don't have the funding. And so, and I thought that was a prudent decision from the membership to say, hey, we're hurting right now. We can't afford this. We want to keep everyone. And we also agreed to hire, we had, back then, if you kept them on board for 4 years, we had grants that paid for a lot of that. So I can't remember what the term was through the COPS hiring program, where one of our positions was paid for a significant amount of time before we actually had to foot the bill on that. So, yeah, it's been a challenging, very challenging when you look at, hey, next year, we'll do this next year. Well, next year's going to come, and we've already agreed to certain increases, and we know that we're going to get that 1% increase in property tax, and that's probably going to be it, and our costs are going to be rising faster. And now, here's another thing that I'm back in my head, the background conversations are, okay, great, now you've increased your police force by said officers, and so every time you do an increase in benefits, payroll, it's exponentially, and the question will become is, will those taxes that you're collecting be enough to continue to pay for that? Some may argue, some may argue that, it's going to be there. I have a more conservative approach that long-term, 5-10 years out, are we really going to be able to sustain that? And maybe even 3 years, we might be finding that answer out. So I agree, it's a challenge to increase what we've asked in the financial policies and procedures to get us up to that 3-month mark. It's just, it just hasn't changed for 8-9 years. And it was way less than that. I mean, we've actually improved. It was down to $250,000 at one point, and we actually had a mayor who was going out suggest that the gambling money that we were going to get from the oak tree was enough to contract out the fire department, which we would have been bankrupt in 6 months had we agreed to do that.
Smartest thing this council ever did was not attach anything to that money.
Right, and that was we don't have that today. So
no, you can look to our neighbors, La Center, that is struggling right now. That city is really, really suffering due to the fact that they attach themselves to those casinos. That's unfortunate.
I think my thoughts, that's really redundant. Anyway, so my thought process is that considering that we're in month 9 of COVID, I think, February, so 8-9 months, and we don't know when this is going to be over. And again, I'm going to remind everyone that probably half the town is underemployed or unemployed. And so people are struggling and people are having to make sacrifices. So the people who fund this city and the people who fund those positions are having to make sacrifices. And we've already raised utilities with the assumption that there are things like roads that are failing and sewers and things like that that have been neglected for years and years that are going to come to a point where it's going to cost a heck of a lot more down the road to fix it. So we've raised utilities so that Public Works can actually do their jobs. So that's about it. And raising the property tax, 1%. The fire department the city's been annexed by the fire department, so that's going to go away. Right? So
In another year.
Right. So that goes away. So realistically, like, again, I'm going to go back to some of these requests, as much as I think some of them are valid. I think everybody should be under the assumption that they too have to make sacrifices, because the people who are funding these things are having to make sacrifices. So I just, the one things for the police department, because Prop 1 generated enough funds and things on this enhancement list could be purchased with Prop 1 dollars. Me, as a taxpayer, I would assume that would be what you would do with that money, if there's leftover money, and then hang on to it. But the other things, like, I don't even see anybody here giving me an argument as to why we need some of these. Like, some of this, I don't even hear an argument as to why. It's just,
We have assessed and put into the budget what we felt is
right. And
most necessary.
like, some of this stuff just kind of, it's remodel the front of the city hall. No. That's an easy no. No. I think it's silly to even have it on there. I mean, great. Who's going to pay for it? I guess if you get like a downtowners grant or something like that to freshen up downtown, like Castle Rock. Oh, that's right. The county doesn't want to give us that money anyway. Never mind. I'm going to get off my thing here, but it's been a hard week. We did like 150 some odd Thanksgiving meals Saturday.
Nice.
And a lot of people were expressing their gratitude because they have been unemployed for a long time, and that they appreciate the fact that Safeway collected the turkey bucks and provided those meals. And so when you have that in the back of your mind, it's really hard to look at things like this when you know the people who've never had to ask for help are having to ask for help now. And they should not. It's a slap in their face to go, look at the pretty little things we're going to do down here, and you have to, ask for help that you've never had to in your life. And a lot of people, that's a prideful thing. And so I just kind of, that's the perspective I'm coming from looking at it, because it's just kind of silly to me to ask for.
It's a wish list.
It is. It's a wish list. And the reason I was so down for the Sally port cover is because I remember when Chief Crochet was asking for it and why he thought it was valid. And it's a safety thing. And when it's a safety thing, I think we can all agree that the safety of our police officers is important. I think Prop 1 proved that. So that's a given. And I don't know why it's taken this long for us to have a conversation about it, but I hope that he gets it next summer, Chief Kelly. But so stuff like that, that's a safety issue. I understand the HVAC thing, and if y'all can write a grant for it, knock yourselves out. But like the other silly stuff is just, you can have the cupcake without the icing. It's better for you anyway.
Thank you, Mrs. Hollis. Mr. Fredericks.
We have to remember that I think the clerk and the annex was a 5-year solution, and we've been there 20-plus years.
Yes. I
So-
believe Mrs. Rip has told me since 1998.
Yes, 22 years, 20, somewhere in there. And so the HVAC system seems to be something that, like, we really should take a look at. And as the Finance Committee, I'd like to have some more information on exactly that, because I don't think it's appropriate that we have employees sitting in 59-degree offices where it's 59 degrees in the back and 70. I've been into the front office in the summertime, and it's like it's hot.
Well, and Ms. Coleman, over the last couple months with the move and the consolidation, has put some items into place to help reduce those temperatures, to help insulate.
Okay.
You will be seeing a new facade, not a new facade, a new looking city hall at a much lower rate without having to replace windows. So it is coming. There's been some foam board that's been put in the windows that will soon be covered up. It'll look more professional to the outside public, to the employees inside as well. So that project's not done, but we're doing the best that we can with the resources we have. And Ms. Coleman has been extremely outside of the box thinking on how to do these without putting so much money into the infrastructure.
And has there been any discussion yet on what we're doing with the property at the old city hall where the fire department is there? Is
I
that
believe
for sale, or what are we doing?
2 years ago, I approached council and asked for a decision and never got one.
A decision on what?
Whether we were going to sell it or if we were going to leave it abandoned, what we were doing with it. But you have to remember, too, that currently right now, it's our record storage area. We don't have any other place to keep dry storage for our records that we're required to keep. So if we do get rid of it, so this was the challenge, and this is what prompted the conversation about building a new city hall and doing those things, and where we can go and find money through grants and grant matches and bringing other organizations in to help that facility come to fruition. We own that What's that?
I just wanted to mention that we did put a request for proposals out for that building.
Yes.
We did work with one company for a while, and it turned out the building needed more renovation than they could afford to make it pencil out. So since then, we haven't acted, but we need to have that discussion.
So my concern is contributing to the overall look of downtown, of having another building that is non-occupied, when we've poured so much money already into it with lights and roadway and sidewalks and a new restroom and connected to the park and the plaza and everything else. So we do need to have that conversation again on what we're planning on doing with it. I was all for getting rid of it and selling it and taking that money and reinvesting it into a new property. But as time goes on, I don't think honestly, I don't think it's in the city's best interest to get rid of it. We own that property. If we have to demolish the building and leave it empty for a while until we do have the funding, because we got to where we are to build a new facility, then that's what we do, because we've already got an investment there that's paid for. So
I was under the impression that the reason that the council didn't provide you with guidance was because we were exploring public-private partnerships for that location, and I don't think the council ever heard back from that, and I don't think on our end...
The conversation stopped.
Okay. And I don't think on our end, I don't think we just questioned...
I guess that was unfair of me to say. I apologize.
That's okay. My feeling wasn't hurt.
That's good.
Your feeling.
Yeah,
my feeling. The one feeling you have.
So have we, and I want to say that we've done this before, but there are companies out there that will store our stuff for us.
It's possible. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
there's a cost.
I say that there's a certain amount of maintenance that is going into that building that I'm wondering...
We pay a little bit of power. We still have some water. We have to keep the temperature at certain, to keep the records safe and those types of things. But it's a continual, it's an old building with a crack going up the side of it that can't be repaired, so.
Yeah.
You can see daylight through it. So I don't know that we're ever going to be able to, honestly, I don't know that we'll ever be able to use that building.
Well, at some point, the issue will be taken care of by Mother Nature.
Thank you, Mr. Fredericks. Well, will insurance cover that? Do we get the building back?
Unless you're paying earthquake insurance.
So, If
It
everybody
is
from,
insured.
if everybody from Public Works here across the parking lot, they're moving to City Hall.
Yes.
So then what's going in that building?
The fire station will eventually expand. That's always been the plan. Public Works eventually is going to have to move. We just sped that up due to COVID and trying to reduce costs other places. Eventually, that fire station will wipe out that building. That's the plan, to expand.
Gotcha.
Is it big enough for record storage?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
Might be cheaper to maintain that one than.
The big one. Mr. Fredericks.
Just a question. It's 5 minutes prior
Oh,
to
yes.
being over, but I guess my question is do we have enough, does the council have enough to move on to avoid us having to have an additional meeting on the 30th of November?
That's my final
Or
question this evening.
Are we safe to move forward with first reading of the budget at the first meeting in December?
Is there anything else that council would like to discuss, any member, or have your concerns, challenges, whatever you want to call them, have they been satisfied? And I've got a small list of things here that I do need some clarification on because it was only discussed and not actually told to do. Let me just go through my list real quick and I'll try and make it fast here. It sounds like Hvac System on the wish list is going to further discussion, further research, and taken to the Finance Committee for further discussion. Humane Society will be asking for, we don't need to go over that, I already did, a generator, $25,000 out of Prop 1 money. Is there an objection to putting that into the budget?
I think the request was suspended this year.
Was suspended, spend it this year. And same with the line 3 there. Okay.
Yes.
Spend this year. Okay. I didn't catch that. We're going to continue the conversations on strategic planning. And, okay, so the only other thing that's really on the table then, it sounds like, is policies moving forward on how we get to a better reserve account and what policies council wants to put in place. And it sounds like that will be a retreat type item, and maybe we'll just start doing workshops. Ms. Holland brought up some good points. What do we do with the new revenue that comes in from new businesses? Restricting of funds coming in January on the Prop 1 money. Is there anything else that we need to prepare for any conversation when we talk about, do we need to move forward with restricting funds of the lodging tax dollars to build a new facility in 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it may be? Is that something that council wants brought back forward next year?
I think it's something that should be discussed in our retreat, if we have one.
But this time, you can't put it off. Last year, early in the year, I think it got pushed, and then we had COVID.
Yeah, okay.
So,
I think it just needs to be scheduled and we're here to do it.
Mayor's fault.
I accept full responsibility.
yeah.
Okay, so then I'm, without objection, I've got 2 minutes, with any objection to bringing forward for a first reading December 1st of the budget that's been presented at this time.
Do we have to make a motion, or?
No,
Can't.
no.
Okay.
Can't.
We
So
can
then,
We can make a motion. You can make, well, you don't have to, but at this meeting, the way it was set up, it's set up to make, we can do motions because it was the way it was set up. It was set up as this, we don't need one, but it's a special meeting. You can't make a motion at a workshop, but you can make a motion at a special meeting.
Gotcha.
Go figure.
which happens to be worse.
What does the mayor need? He has a minute.
The mayor needs to know if we're having a meeting on Monday, or if I'm to bring this completed to you on the first meeting in December.
Completed, bring it to us in December.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
So that would be December 7th?
Yes, the
Okay.
first meeting.
Motion on the floor to adjourn by Councilmember Frederick, seconded by Councilmember Smith. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
It was Plaza that seconded the adjournment. Thank you for the record. The time is now 5. Oh, any nays? Meeting adjourned 9:59. All right. Thank you,
Everybody
everybody.
have a good Thanksgiving.
Oh yes, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. We'll see you in
No more
December.
than 5 people.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
I need to talk to you though, Tracy. Hold on.